Sheehan comes up with it. Looking for Whitmore. Kick out. Johnson, pure three in the corner. Whitmore, over the tray again, relocates. Okay. See why they drafted him. And came into camp talking about being more of a reliable guard in that second unit. Another corner three. 1, 2, 3.
That's a good job, Trey Johnson, in your first game. Chris Miller, Drew Gooden on the call last night. The Wizards didn't win the game, which is also good news. We want them to finish with one of the 8 worst records in the NBA. I think that's pretty much a given. At one point in the first half, Milwaukee had made 12 threes. Some of the defensive situations weren't pretty, but really loved what Keyshawn, George, and Trey Johnson did last night. George was the guy last year that I actually really liked. Trey Johnson was, as most of you know, who care about the NBA and care about the NBA draft. That's who I wanted them to select at number 6 overall. And he looked the part. No one will question his ability to shoot it. You saw that at Texas. There were a couple of things that I'll nitpick about his performance, not for long, I promise. But I will get to that shortly. We have a power-packed show today. We got a lot of people that are going to join us on the show today. We have Charch. We've got Denton coming up in this hour. We've got an NFL guest. We've got some Steve Suter film breakdown. We've got power rankings today. Lots going on a show during a week that is one of the busiest of the sports calendar. NFL, college football in full swing, the World Series getting ready to begin tomorrow night, and the NBA has now kicked off its season with a major blockbuster, ugly story to talk about this morning. Chauncey Billups and Terry Rozier arrested this morning. One in Miami, one in Oregon, all gambling related. We'll get to the details on this because there's still a lot that I have to soak in here on what Chauncey Billups in particular, a Hall of Fame player, okay, a player that's made $150 million in his lifetime as an NBA player and coach. But there's a lot to get to. The Terry Rozier thing had been bubbling up for a couple of years. We had the Michael Porter Jr. brother incident where he essentially got booted from the league. Gambling, man, betting on sports. It's fun, can also get dangerous. Good morning, everybody. Max is here with me. Let me get this out of the way. No smell test pick tonight. A lot of you thought for sure I was going to give out the Vikings. I'm not giving out the Vikings. The action's pretty split. Actually, if anything, the under looks right in this game. It's 45. There's a lot of overaction, but no official pick from me on the Thursday night game, which should be a good one. Chargers, Vikings, kind of a big game for both teams. The Chargers sitting there at 4-3. They started 3-0. They've lost 3 out of their last 4. They have major offensive line issues. We saw that when Washington went to L.A. just 2 weeks ago. Remember that 2 weeks ago when Jaden was lights out after the first 2 drives? Krosky Merritt was going to win the Offensive Rookie of the Year. The pass rush was dominant. Trey Amos starting to look like maybe the Defensive Rookie of the Year. Remember that? That was just 2 weeks ago. Relax. There are bad games. There are bad stretches and seasons. There are even bad seasons, especially when you have an S-load of injuries. But wait a few weeks. The NFL weather changes pretty quickly. But it should be a good game tonight. Carson Wentz is starting, correct? I think he is.
Yes, he is starting tonight.
Yeah, that situation is an interesting situation. You can't obviously have an opinion on J.J. McCarthy at this point. He's only played 2 games. I mean, drafts in general, you got to just back off, the evaluation after a year and some time. The thing you would say about McCarthy is availability is the best ability. And when he was available for those brief 2 games or 2.5 games, he did not play well. He did not look the part, that's for sure. But long way to go there. Carson Wentz doesn't really look like the part either. And the Chargers are banged up. That should be a decent. We've had some really entertaining Thursday night football games. Last week, the Joe Flacco win over Pittsburgh was phenomenal. The week before that was Giants over Eagles. We had walk-off, kicks in back-to-back weeks previous to that. So maybe we'll get another really good Thursday night game to kick off, believe it or not, week 8 already in the NFL. Week 8. Insane that we are here already approaching the halfway mark of the NFL season with the college season, and we'll talk to Denton about this as we preview the upcoming weekend, now into the second half of its season. So, NBA last night, before we get to this breaking story here this morning, Neil in Rockville, by the way, if you're listening and you want to call in to the hotline or just the regular line, I know that you have read through a lot of this stuff, so it would be interesting to get your thoughts on it. But real quickly, Wembanyama last night was probably the story of NBA night number 2. Wembanyama is 7'5", has a wingspan from here, from downtown DC to Frederick, and he just looks different than any player we've seen in the league in a long time. I think I felt that way about Giannis for several years. He dwarfs Giannis. If you watched any of the game last night, it was interesting to watch Anthony Davis try to guard him. Anthony Davis looked like a JV player next to Wembanyama, size-wise. Wembanyama is just so tall and so long, and then on top of that, so ridiculously skilled. It's scary how skilled he is for somebody that tall. An excellent ball handler. Faces, can go by you with the dribble, can create off the dribble, can shoot the three. He can do it, stepping back. He can do it spotting up. He's obviously around the basket, a dunk machine, a lob machine. He is a defensive force. 40 points, 15 rebounds, 3 block shots in 30 minutes last night. 30 minutes of action. They destroyed Dallas in the opener, 125-92. He's really got and there's a chance here, and I think most of you who follow the NBA realize this. Wembanyama is going to change the game in a lot of ways. We've never seen somebody this tall, this skilled. And when I watch him, for you old school guys, I think of Ralph Sampson and the way he looked when he was such an outlier, because at 7'4", Ralph could put the ball on the floor. Ralph could face the basket and shoot. Ralph wanted to be a point guard. He fancied himself to be a point guard, even though he was a 7'4" center. And when he got to the NBA and he was side by side with Hakeem Olajuwon, he was the forward. He was not the center. Now, back then, you're not shooting threes. I think Ralph could have shot a lot of threes. He had a great stroke. He could put the ball on the floor, not at the same level as Wembanyama, though. I think Ralph always felt like he was a better ball handler than he was. And look, the NBA with free-flowing, no hand check, et cetera, it's a different game, obviously, than it was back then. But there is, every time I watch Wembanyama, I'm like, that's what I kind of thought about Ralph back in those days. Ralph Sampson is one of the greatest college basketball players ever, of all time. I mean, the only thing that keeps him from being consistently in that conversation for everybody is the fact that he didn't win a national championship. He got to a Final Four, but didn't win a national championship. And the expectation, especially his senior year, was they were going to win the whole thing. They were a 1-seed. NC State knocked them off, the Valvano team, in the Elite Eight in Atlanta. And that sent Ralph home for good. Obviously, he ended up having a really solid NBA career, but never turned into what we thought he could turn into. But Wembanyama, man, the San Antonio Spurs and that organization, God, they got the number 1 pick. Imagine if Wembanyama was here in Washington, how this organization would be viewed, not only nationally, but, not only locally, but nationally. It would be a lot more exciting than what we're going through right now. On the Wizards game, so I really like George. I liked George last year. I think out of all of the guys that have been drafted previous to this year, we had Chase Hughes on the show, and Chase had, George there as well. I love George. I love everything about him. He's versatile. He has a bit of a killer instinct in him as a scorer, as a shooter. He can score, he can shoot, he can defend, he can facilitate. 21 last night. Where's the box score? 21, 4 assists, 9 rebounds. He was 7 of 15 from the floor, 3 for 6 from behind the arc. Missed 4 free throws. Yeah, I did notice that. 21 points. Good game for him. I think he's the guy. I don't see him as like transcendent top 5, but I definitely see him potentially as an all-star. And I think he's much more valuable, honestly, than Bilal Coulibaly, kind of in that spot. I like Coulibaly, especially on the defensive end. And then Trey Johnson, who I loved coming out, as most of you know, I wanted them really desperately at number 6 to pick him if he was still on the board. What you saw at Texas is what you saw last night. The dude can just flat out shoot it, but he's more than just a shooter. Here's the thing that just in his first game for me, and I have, a bit of Bradley Beal flashback when it comes to this. He's just a little bit loose at times with the handle, How many turnovers did he end up with last night? 4 turnovers last night in his first game in 26 minutes. I love it. I really like him. And this is his first game. 16 points, 5 of 11 from the floor, 4 for 8 from behind the arc. And you heard 3 or did you play all 4 of them or just 3 of them coming in?
Just 3. We just had 3.
Yeah. The one thing, especially with young players like him, you can't end up, you got to protect the basketball. You can't waste possessions with not seeing, opposite passing lanes, with having too loose of a handle. It was always my criticism of Beal more than anything else. Just as a ball handler, even coming out of Florida, he was just a bit too loose with it, and he turned the ball over a lot because of it. And it was always his problem in the NBA. But the long way to go. Really good first night for him. 16 points, 5 rebounds, 2 assists, a steal, a block shot in 26 minutes. By the way, he only played for because I watched the whole game start to finish. I think I'm going to end up really liking Will Riley, the first round pick out of Illinois. He's not going to get a lot of time right now. Eventually he will. There's something about the way he competes that I like. I don't even know how many minutes he played. It was not a lot. 4 minutes last night. He had a steal. He had an assist, he had a rebound, and he had a made bucket in 4 minutes. I think we're going to end up liking Will Riley for sure. But yeah, there you go. I mean, 133, 120, Giannis, 37 points. They made 18 of 44 from behind the arc, but it's seemingly they made all of them in the first half. It seemed like it. Wizards actually made a bit of a run. They had it to 7. I never thought in watching it that Milwaukee wouldn't be able to turn on hit the gas again and extend the lead. And it was never really a game that was truly in doubt. But some young players that are definitely worth the watch. They play tomorrow night in Dallas. And the Dallas coming off last night's absolute, annihilation loss to the Spurs and Wembanyama. So look, this story that's breaking this morning, we got to get to it, and I will in the next segment. Chauncey Billups and Terry Rozier arrested by the FBI this morning. Chauncey Billups is the head coach. This is a head coach. This is not a player. This is a head coach on night 2 in the NBA. It's not good. More on that next. So a pretty big story breaking this morning. Chauncey Billups, NBA Hall of Famer, head coach of the Portland Trailblazers, along with Miami Heat guard Terry Rozier, arrested this morning as a part of a pair of investigations related to illegal gambling. Rozier was arrested at a hotel in Orlando, Florida. The Heat lost their season opener last night to Orlando. He did not play due to a coach's decision. Meantime, Chauncey Billups arrested in Oregon after, by the way, he coached last night, the Trailblazers opener. They lost to Minnesota 118-114. Anthony Edwards, by the way, 41 in the opener. Billups was arrested as part of a separate but related illegal gambling case linked to an illegal poker operation tied to the mafia, according to ABC News. By the way, also remember Damon Jones, the corner three shooter on some of the LeBron teams in Cleveland. He's a former Cavs assistant coach as well. He was arrested on charges that he provided inside information about NBA games to co-defendants who used it to place sports bets, also according to ABC News. FBI cracking down on illegal stuff. And all of it, by the way, is sponsored by BetMGM. The NBA will be running those spots during their games or whatever spots they use, DraftKings, FanDuel, whatever it is. I heard this story this morning coming in, and then I'm reading through it, and there's a lot of questions that I have. I know that the FBI is holding a news conference currently to explain those, but we have asked our legal correspondent and contributor to this program, Neil in Rockville, to jump on with us because you texted me. You were the one that let me know this was going on this morning. So what do we have here? Because my first reaction was, well, you don't get arrested unless you're betting on your own team or point shaving. You know, you get booted from the league for betting because you're not allowed to, but you don't get arrested. Now we find out this is tied to an illegal poker operation, which was mafia influenced. What do you know, and what do you think this is all about?
Well, interestingly, and I'm still picking through the pieces, I think the Damon Jones matter, I think he was like just cleared of an internal NBA investigation. There were some internal NBA investigations, I think, tied to some of this stuff just recently, and I'm still trying to pull some information about that. So there really are two sort of separate matters. It's the Damon Jones and Rozier directly having to do with NBA games, and then the Billups is the poker. But I think they're all tied to what I've been watching the press conference. I mean, they're identifying Los Costa Nostra as the part of the mafia, the old fashioned mafia,
really?
who's tied to this, particularly with the Billups and the Rozier. And it sounds like the direct NBA stuff had to do with prop bets and background information about players, and then there were also seemingly some threats against other players because of debts, some other gambling debts. So, those are all direct NBA related, possibly shavings, information, insider stuff. And then there's the Billups, which is related to an illegal poker situation, which also is seemingly was run by the mafia.
But you're saying old style Italian mafia,
the La Cosa Nostra. I mean, that's we're talking. In some ways, if you go back to
Henry Hill, Boston College,
exactly. I mean, that's that type of stuff. And so, a lot of times, nowadays it's, a lot of some of the other types of mafia, Russian mafia, Ukraine, all these different types of mafia. But this is seemingly Italian mafia, as what's coming out of the words of the FBI press conference right now. And the Billups one, and Tommy, who, has so much interrelated investigative reporting with the mafia, including taking the list of mafia people.
He did that. Lavero did that. Yeah, he took a seating chart from a secret mafia get together in the hills of Pennsylvania many years ago. He went in and stole the seating chart so he could write about the people who were at that meeting. It's a true story.
So, but the interesting thing is, for the Billups one, particularly with, legal poker, that creates, huge problems because, as we all know, one of the whole issues with, illegal versus legal gambling is, sure, Billups might not have been providing any information, or he might not have been betting on games or taking any direct action, but when you're dealing with illegal poker games run by the mob, if you start getting down, you got to figure out some way to pay off your debts. And, if you don't have the money, the one
it's a Molly's game situation.
Yeah. I mean, you're potentially giving information about, or even not just information, maybe you're holding back some people, in certain games, or you're holding the points down or something like that, where, you're paying off your debts. Because I don't understand why someone would participate in an illegal poker ring run by the mafia, specifically because now today we have public,
Yeah, well, I mean, wouldn't the reason be what we saw before we had legal, online poker? And obviously we have legal poker in Vegas and other places and lots of other casinos where gambling's legal now. But, it's the super high stakes games with some of the super high rollers. Those are always illegal, especially if you take a rake, right?
Sure. Oh, certainly. And and depending, now we find out who's running some of those. And, if you get down on those, it's like, you gotta pay the VIG somehow, and you gotta pay your, if you're down, you gotta give them information if you don't have the money. And that's definitely what leads to the problems in this investigation. And the other one, the other one is like direct information about prop bets. It's about all the,
It's like Michael Porter Jr.'s brother just got booted from the league for some of that. Prop bets are the easiest to tank on, and the easiest to, essentially tell, whatever syndicate you have, or maybe it's just a group of friends, hey, I'm going low tonight, I'm going low on the personal, point total.
And and one of the things is, it's funny because you've been talking about gambling forever and ever and ever. And it's, and a lot of times it's the legal gambling that can sometimes hear about, the illegal gambling, which can sometimes they'll call the attention to the FBI.
Of course.
Because they can see there's also, gambling situations, out of the country, and, they can, they'll let them know because it messes up the legal gambling more than it, helps, the illegal gambling. So they're more than happy to jump on that stuff and provide information to the authorities.
No, Tommy and I recorded something together early this morning, and I said to him, remember when this all started to percolate, legal sports betting, and all of the leagues thought that the big home run was going to be from an integrity fee that the legal sports books would pay, the NBA, the NFL, Major League Baseball, the NHL. And I said, no, you got that wrong. It's the opposite. The sports books are the ones that will be able to keep the integrity of the game. They're the ones, even before sports betting became legal, were the ones that would identify suspicious betting on games and would inform the leagues. The leagues don't have that information. They can't keep the integrity of the game with legal betting. It's the sports books that have to need to do that and have the means of monitoring that. And by the way, they're in... they have a mutual interest. The sports books don't want to be taken to the cleaners by some sort of an illegal operation, which is why they've always been able to identify suspicious, betting, behaviors and inform leagues on that. We've seen that. How do you think the BC thing came crashing down, or the Tulane thing came crashing down, or the Arizona State thing came crashing down? It was because, at that time, legal sports books in Vegas let the Pac-12 know, or let the Big East know at the time, or whatever it was.
Sure.
So back to just back to Chauncey Billups. So if this is, remember Gilbert Arenas got arrested and then released, and he kind of was excited, saying, "I told you I didn't have anything to do with it," but they were using a house that Arenas owned, I guess. Is this anyway tied to that, do you think?
No, I don't think it's that kind of stuff. And that was never, that sounded like it was sort of more, secondary. That was never.
Somebody was using a house that Gilbert Arenas owned for illegal poker games.
Yeah, they run some illegal poker games, but that's like when, people were running house games. It was still illegal to run house games.
What do you think Billups did?
I think he might have just been playing in illegal poker games. I mean, and he might have been running up some large amounts. I mean, look at the Shohei Ohtani situation with his manager and trainer. When people start getting into, debt with that type of people, you gotta pay off your debts. And, if Billups could say, if Billups could move 1 or 2 points or, keep some people out and some stuff like that, it's, he can provide a lot of information and pay off a lot of debts with that stuff. It's, and it's also, they did do the arrests, and, sometimes they do arrests, sometimes they do let people know that there's a warrant out for their arrest, and, you can come and turn yourself in and stuff like that. But, they decided that they wanted to go out there and make, old-fashioned arrests, bring them in, hold them, and they'll present them for, arraignments and, consider bond and all that kind of stuff. I presume Billups is out, forever. I mean, that's something that's going to just, we're not going to see him again. And then the other guy,
we're certainly not going to see him until this gets resolved. By the way, here's the details of the Gilbert Arenas arrest back in late July this past summer. Gilbert Arenas arrested in connection with a federal indictment that alleges that the former NBA star hosted illegal high-stakes poker games at his mansion in Encino, California. He was officially charged with 1 count of conspiracy to operate an illegal gambling business, 1 count of operating an illegal gambling business, and 1 count of making false statements to federal investigators. He was eventually released, and the charges were dropped. And to me, it would be interesting if Gilbert Arenas, in exchange for having the charges dropped, started dropping some names.
That's a lot of times, particularly if you're running the house, unfortunately, it's a lot of times the people at the top know all the people below, and that's the way it could have played out.
Yeah. Well, this is a developing situation, and I know I took you out of watching the FBI press conference. Is Kash Patel actually running the press conference?
Well, Kash is not. No, he's not the one at the podium. The guy at the podium is the U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of New York, Joseph Nocella. However, Kash is right there at his right with his little FBI badge, and he's there.
Not great news for the NBA here on night 2 of the NBA. The other thing is that it's just
coached yesterday, last night.
I know, coached last night.
Yeah.
He coached last night in their opener against Minnesota, and then woke up this morning in cuffs.
Did they win?
No, they lost 118-114. I wonder if he knew.
Makes it interesting, isn't it?
It's we talk a lot about gambling on this show. I have for years now, and when the whole discussion about legalization started, and you knew that there was going to be so much of this to come, but the integrity of the games, and I know that the Billups thing has nothing to do with games, it would appear, but the integrity of the games is the most important thing for these leagues. Taking the advertising money from legal sports books is secondary to ensuring that these games have integrity. Without that, you've got professional wrestling, and it would never matter as much as it does now.
But the Billups thing could be exactly about the integrity of the game, because if he was having to, pay off debts,
Yeah,
then-
well, that's the thing. People say, people say all the time, well, who cares if they end up betting on other sports or on other teams? Well, when you get into it and you get deep into it and you owe somebody a lot of money, the easiest way out of that debt, if you're a coach or a player, is to say, hey, tomorrow night, we're getting 3, we're going to get smoked.
Hey, Pete Rose never bet on his team to lose.
Yeah,
but,
of course.
Look,
I got offered to drive a car to St. Louis to get out of a debt way back in the day in college. I've told you that story. I've told everybody that story. My buddy and I got into it with, the book. This was, by the way, a Philadelphia bookmaker. We were down, enough money.
Not our local high school bookmaker in Rockville.
No, it was not, handing out, parlay sheets to your friends. This was, real money when we were in college. And the book said, look, if you guys want to clean the slate, just drive this car and drop this car off in St. Louis. And my buddy wanted to do it. And I said, are you out of your mind? We're in. If we drive, what do you think's in the trunk of that car? We came up with the money. That was maturity stepping in to keep us from getting indoctrinated into what would have been a terrible life, more likely than not, and maybe a short one. All right, thanks for doing this.
You got it, man. Take care.
All right. Up next, Denton will join us. We'll talk college football, and we'll get Denton's best bets for the weekend. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980, and the Team980.com.
All right. Happy Thursday, everybody. Here's what's happening. It is October 23rd, and the big story of the morning, the FBI has announced a number of arrests that have been made in relation to illegal sports gambling and poker operations allegedly tied to the Italian mafia. Included among the 34 defendants arrested this morning, Portland Trailblazers head coach Chauncey Billups and former Miami Heat guard Terry Rozier. Looking further into the NBA, the Wizards, they took on the Bucks last night in Chris Middleton's first game back in Milwaukee since being traded last season. The former Bucks forward led the Wizards in scoring with 23 points, 6 rebounds, and 3 assists, but the defense for the Wizards largely came up short early with 72 points allowed in the first half. The Wizards fall 133-120. This update is sponsored by the Team 980 YouTube page. Just open the app, type in the Team 980, hit subscribe. Kevin Sheehan is live every day from 10 to 1. You can catch Denton's office throughout all football season. Don't forget to hit the like button whenever you do decide to join us, and turn on notifications to stay up to date on all things DC sports. And that is what's trending.
Pick up your book bags. Grab your notebooks. It's time to go on campus with Denton.
Hey, give me my theme music.
This from a friend of mine. He just sent me a link to the story. Denton's joining us right now, but I just want to read from it off of the conversation about Chauncey Billups. Yesterday, the NCAA approved a rule change that will allow athletes and athletic department staff members to bet on professional sports. The rule goes into effect on November 1st. So college athletes were not allowed to bet legally or illegally, and now they are allowed to bet on professional sports. Again, like Neil and I talked about, this is the part where if you're new to this and you don't follow this, it doesn't matter what you bet on. If you're an athlete or a coach, you could bet on, crew. If you get in deep with the book and you owe, an illegal bookmaker a lot of money, the way out sometimes is to then take your position in your sport and make something happen. Yeah, the over-under on my point total tonight is 16.5. I'm going way under. So we'll clear the tab that I owe you after I go, 3 for 12 from the floor and score 7 points. I think that's a bad idea, man. Bad idea. But the other thing too, and I talked about this yesterday, Denton, how about the fact that G League players are now allowed to go back to college and play? Have you seen that?
Yes.
The G League NBA players are allowed to go back and play in college.
I saw a story on that and I thought it was fake. I was like,
it's not fake.
How are we getting back to that point? Also, I love the irony of the fact that less than 24 hours ago, the NCAA approved that rule. And then this morning, Rozier gets hit, Chauncey Billups gets hit. And I have heard that there's a potential of Malik Beasley getting re-hit. The NBA cleared him, but he might be a part of this in some capacity as well. And I will guarantee you this, they are not the only ones. This is far more prevalent in the NBA than I think most people realize. It's a little bit more difficult in the NFL, but in the NBA with props, you're in such control of whatever your particular number is that there's going to be way more than just these three guys that are in on this.
Right. All right, let's talk some college football. I actually want to start with Maryland. Denton hosts a college football show on Sirius XM, has for the last few years, and Denton joins us every Thursday in this spot to talk college football. The Terps have lost 3 heartbreakers in a row. They blew a 20-0 lead, lost to Washington. They had the lead, a 10-point lead over Nebraska in the second half, lost to them, and had a 7-point lead against UCLA. Or had a lead, 10-7 in the fourth quarter against UCLA and lost to them. I don't know if you've watched them much, but I've gotten into it with a bunch of Maryland fans and Maryland people on Malik Washington, their young quarterback, and their offensive coordinator, Pep Hamilton, who, by the way, was the OC at Stanford for Andrew Luck. Then Andrew Luck basically took him with him into the NFL to be the offensive coordinator at Indianapolis in Luck's early years. Have you watched much of Maryland? I'm assuming not. Why would you?
Not nearly as much as you have, but I have kept up with Malik Washington in particular. He is interesting to me.
So I'm going to hit you with something now that I don't think a lot of people know. Maryland and Malik Washington. Malik Washington has been sacked 2 times in 7 games. Mm-hmm. The fewest of any quarterback in the Big Ten, other than more than any quarterback in the Big Ten, including Julian Sayin, who's been sacked 3 times, the quarterback of Ohio State. Mm-hmm. Top 3 in the country in the fewest times sacked. If you've watched Maryland and you see they cannot run the ball, they do not have an offensive line where they can run the ball. And by the way, they're not much better in pass protection, to be honest with you. For that to be a number with a freshman quarterback is insane and can only be a result. Well, for the most part, more likely than not, can only be about an offensive coordinator who recognizes their deficiencies, recognizes he's got a freshman quarterback, and is designed and play called around that. That's an amazing number to not be sacked as a freshman quarterback with no running game and not a great ability to protect the passer. That's why I think Pep Hamilton's done a good job with him. Malik Washington's problem is he's inaccurate. Yeah. Something we talked about very early on. He is wildly inaccurate at times. He is athletic. He's big. He's, I think he sees it. He's under center. Pep's doing a lot of play action to try to keep the pass rush at bay. They're using short passes as part of the run game. But his inaccuracy is more responsible for losing 3 in a row than I think Pep Hamilton's play calling is. That's all. I'll just say that. He's a 59% passer. If he were a 63% passer, Maryland, instead of being 4-3, would be 5-2 or 6-1 right now.
They definitely wouldn't be in the position to where you are now circling Michigan State and Rutgers as must-wins to get into a bowl game.
Yeah,
so they wouldn't be win hunting the way that they are now. It is pretty insane to think that they can execute on that level to where he's not getting sacked, but then they're not winning games either. And it is the inaccuracy. And to be fair to Malik Washington, there are not a lot of quarterbacks that as a freshman coming in immediately are super duper accurate. It's just very, very rare.
Also, to be fair, he's got a major drop problem with his receivers. They drop a lot. I think they lead the Big Ten, or they're top 2 or 3 in the Big Ten in drop passes. So that's been an issue as well. But if you watch him, Denton, there's definitely some flaws, and they're going to have to fix those. And Pep Hamilton is good at doing that. I think he is. This is a process with a true freshman starting at quarterback in the Big Ten, and it's going to take some time. But he'll try to drill it through a brick wall from 3 feet away. I mean, he's not a great touch thrower at this point.
Which, again, as a freshman, that'd be stunning if he was. Because I can think of one freshman that came in and was really, really good, and that was Trevor Lawrence. But he even wasn't immediately really good because if you remember, it was him and Kelly Bryant, and Dabo had to decide, and he eventually benched Kelly Bryant like 4 or 5 games into the season to then elevate Trevor Lawrence. But that Clemson team was talented. I mean, that was one of the best teams that we'd ever seen prior to the next year when LSU became one of the best teams we'd ever seen.
I would say this, that, and I'm referencing Mike Shanahan when I say this. Mike Shanahan told me once, accuracy is something that you can work on and you can improve. But if you don't have it naturally, you'll never be elite at it. He said the best accuracy is incredibly important. And he's like, if you don't have it naturally, you can improve and you can become good, but you'll never be an elite accurate passer. There's a natural part of it that is sort of innate as a thrower. And I don't think Malik has that. I don't. Now, again, of course it can improve and it can get better. And he will, apparently he is smart and he's got a great work ethic. The Maryland people that are killing Pep Hamilton, I think, are missing a part of this. I'm not saying that there haven't been some frustrating moments for me either in watching them, because they are good defensively, Denton. They're really good on defense. And they're good enough defensively to be, if they were just a little bit better offensively, an 8-9 win team this year, legitimately. And by the way, their defense is super young and now it's super injured. But yeah, it's been frustrating to watch. And look, this is not, I'm not extending this to Loxley. I still think, as I've said for many years, they're too undisciplined. They commit too many penalties to be an upper tier team. It's been his hallmark. Recruiting outstanding players, future NFL players, but a team that typically is among the top 2 or 3 teams in the Big Ten in penalties, one of the top, teams in the country when it comes to penalties. And it's that lack of discipline that has been an absolute given with his team since he arrived at Maryland. And it's been, one of those hurdles that they have to clear to ever become, better than what they've been. And in the Big Ten games anyway. I'm consuming this segment with Maryland talk. I don't want to do that with you. Can you stick around for another segment after we're done with this one?
Yeah, I can. But let me stay on the Maryland thing then.
Yes, please.
Here. What's their connection to private equity? Because that's
the Big Ten thing?
Yeah, because that's the future of the Big Ten. And like, you have a quarterback that I think has the potential to be the best quarterback they've had under Loxley. I thought, Talia was good, but I do think the ceiling from Malik Washington is higher. Now with private equity,
I agree with that.
Everybody has money. Can you keep him? Because that's been one of their biggest struggles is that Locks does a really good job recruiting players, and then they leave because everyone else can offer them money. Like, it has to be a gut punch for you and other Maryland fans to look at Roman Hemby having immense amount of success elsewhere when you should have kept him, but you didn't have the financial resources to do so. And now, like Indiana showcased when they signed Cignetti, that everyone has money now in the Big Ten. So I hope that Maryland can find money to keep guys like Malik Washington around. It would be another just gut punch to develop him to a point and then have somebody else pluck him, like potentially an Ohio State, Penn State, whoever, pluck him, and then they develop him to the point where he's now reaching the talent that we saw he could, and you just didn't do it at your program.
Yeah. The story that you mentioned, I haven't talked about it on the air. I have been following it to a certain degree, and that is the Big Ten potentially taking a massive private equity deal, like an investment of like $7 billion.
Yeah.
Something like that. I'm sorry, $2 billion.
$2 billion over 10 years.
$2 billion. No, it would be $2 billion $2 billion for 10% of the league. Anyway, long story short, that doesn't change the salary cap. The salary cap is an NCAA thing where you've got a $20.5 million salary cap to spread out among the athletic department. But that gets into what you would have then potentially for NIL deals. But the NIL, right now in terms of the enforcement of the new rules is still a TBD, situation.
So all over the place. But the nice thing about the equity would then be for Maryland. All right, how can we improve what we have going on here as a program?
Yeah.
How can our facilities upgrade?
But they're getting $20.5 million, of which 80% of it's going to men's football.
Right.
And then the differences between a Maryland and Ohio State is what Ohio State has for NIL.
Right. And their NIL is just absolutely insane. It's like they report on a certain number, but I know that number is a little bit larger than what is reported on.
Right. By the way, the Michigan linebacker, Barham, that was at Maryland too, losing him, that dude looks to me like a first round
Sunday player
prospect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, Maryland has done a good job recruiting guys that are going to play on Sundays.
Oh,
they just don't do a good job of keeping them around.
Let me just mention something. This is probably, I don't think I'm speaking out of school here. Locks for sure has been one of the best recruiters, considering what Maryland is, which is a non-big time football school. It's in the Big Ten, but it's one of the, true basketball first schools, always has been that. He is clearly an unbelievable communicator and salesman. The recruiting's incredible. The market to recruit in, the DMV, is great. But I also heard that when we read this story, remember last February, that he had interviewed for the Jets head coaching job. Yes. Remember, Denton, we were doing the show and we're like, really?
Yeah, they
interviewed
were turning all stones. The Jets were.
I heard that he was the most impressive of anybody interviewed by the Jets. They hired Aaron Glenn. It would be hard to hire Mike Loxley with the record that he has, and justify that hire. But I've heard that he was the most impressive interview that anybody of anybody that the Jets interviewed. And it doesn't surprise me. He's a high quality person, and he is a phenomenal communicator and leader. I just, from a discipline standpoint on the field, that's been Maryland's, bugaboo. I mean, the penalties have just, hurt them time in and time out in some of the games that they've had chances to win in the Big Ten, because his overall Big Ten record is terrible.
Yeah. It has to be for you, I'd imagine, pretty tough to deal with discipline issues and then receivers dropping things on Saturdays and on Sundays, because both teams have that issue in this market.
Yes, they both do. He's 17-43 in the Big Ten. How many Big Ten coaches would survive 6-7 years of 17-43? And by the way, the overall record 37-44 at Maryland.
Right. That is not many. I'm Googling Greg Schiano's record right now, because I think he'd probably be the only other person that could survive.
Greg Schiano had a year in which they were top 10 at Rutgers. Remember that?
Yeah, that was years ago, but yes.
It was.
I mean, that was almost 20 years ago, which is crazy to say.
Is it
loud.
20 years ago?
Yeah, it was
no.
07. Yeah.
Maryland went in and beat Rutgers. They were in the top 10, and they beat them. And it was like, are you kidding me? We're playing Rutgers in a top 10 matchup. And they weren't in the league. They weren't sharing a league at that point. It was an ACC versus Big East game. All right, let's talk other college football with Denton. We'll do that after these words from a few of our sponsors. You're listening to the Kevin Sheehan Show on the Team 980, theteam980.com. And don't forget, you can watch us on our YouTube page. Just open up the app, the Odyssey app, type in Team 980 and hit subscribe. All right, we're keeping Denton on for a little bit longer because we consumed the 15 minutes previously on Maryland football talk. Terps, by the way, they have a bye this week, and then Indiana comes to town. Indiana, the number 2 team in America in College Park next Saturday, 3:30 kick in College Park for that one. Denton, of course, the host right here on 980 and 106.7 The Fan of the Commanders pre- and post-game shows, and he is the host of College Football Overtime on Sirius XM at the Denton Day on X on Twitter. So right now, who's the best team in America?
I would say Indiana. I think they're the best. I think their defense is fantastic. I think their quarterback is the best quarterback in college football right now, at least of the really good teams. Yeah, I think Ty Simpson might be a better quarterback, but I think Alabama has some flaws between him and Sheehan and Marcel Reed. I think Fernando Mendoza is the best.
Ohio State's defense, I understand how bad Wisconsin's terrible this year. They're just awful this year. Their defense, it doesn't change the fact it is fantastic. Lights out.
I mean, Patricia has done a fantastic job, and everybody's bought in. Obviously, losing a guy like Jim Knowles, who went over to Penn State, which we only heard about 1,000 times over the offseason, but Patricia's done a great job, and they do such a good job kind of working with what his philosophy is, and he creates a ton of confusion. The reason why I would have Indiana as better than Ohio State, though, Kevin, is because we've seen Indiana do it against a really good team in Oregon. I mean, they dominated the front, which Oregon, as you know, has historically had such a great offensive line on a yearly basis. It's one of the areas they really excel at in terms of building their team. So to do what Indiana did against them, that was incredible. And we really haven't seen Ohio State play a bunch of great teams this year.
That's true, and they're not going to play great teams. No. I mean, of course, Michigan could beat them for a 5th straight year at the end, but more likely than not, Indiana and Ohio State are going to meet for the first time in the Big Ten title game. And at that point, Denton, they'll both have, the berth in a 12-team playoff wrapped up. It'll be about who's going to get a first-round bye. Right. At that point.
And I would say, let's just say they both get there, hypothetically, unbeaten, it trips up or anything in the late stages of October and November. I would say Ohio State's probably a 3.5-point favorite neutral site. But I think I would like Indiana in that matchup.
Wow. Do you see anybody else outside of the 2 best teams in the Big Ten, Ohio State and Indiana? You think Indiana is the best team in the country? Who's close?
I do like Alabama. It's just over the past couple of weeks, last week is a little bit different because they kind of did whatever they wanted to against Tennessee. But over the last couple of weeks when they played Vanderbilt in Missouri, I just noticed they had to execute at an insanely high level. There wasn't a lot of room to kind of wiggle with, right? So that does worry me a little bit. I do think that Ty Simpson is the best quarterback right now in college football. I think he's playing at an exceptionally high level. The throws that he makes on a consistent basis are really, really impressive. I just need to see it. I want to see a little bit more consistency and a little bit more comfort in some of their wins. And I know the SEC is amazing. I get it. I hear all of these things on a regular basis. I do think Alabama is close. We'll see about Texas A&M. If Texas A&M goes into Death Valley and beats LSU and beats them pretty handedly, that would be really, really impressive to me. I mean, they're favorites on the road in Death Valley, which there are not a lot of teams over the course of recent history that have held that position. If they can go in and beat LSU, I'd be really impressed. Whit Weeks, I don't think, is going to play the linebacker for LSU. And if you remember, Marcel Reed had his first really impressive showing against LSU last year. So there's a little bit of a full circle moment. He just dominated them with his legs in 2024. So we'll kind of see what happens there. But if they have a pretty emphatic victory over LSU, I think I will have to change my tune a little bit because I haven't been a huge Marcel Reed fan.
Me neither.
If they win pretty handedly, he will start to rise up, and Texas A&M will start to really rise up.
I'll tell you, LSU is such a disappointment. Nussmeier is a big disappointment. I don't think he's been right physically all year, but that's beside the point. They just have struggled to score. And then for the first time this year, they couldn't get off the field against Diego Pavia and Vanderbilt. How good is Vandy?
They're good. And I would circle it on your calendar right now, the potential of Vanderbilt and Tennessee at the end of the year, final game of the season, for a spot in the college football playoff. Which, I mean, how crazy does that sound to say out loud, but they are really, really good. They do a lot of things. They're built well in the trenches, and they do a lot of those things really well. They execute at a really high level. They're not the flashiest team in the world, despite the fact that we love their quarterback for kind of being brass and out there publicly, but they're not the flashiest team. They just do what they do at a really, really high level. He's right now, I think he's like third in Heisman voting, or in Heisman odds, rather, at 8-1.
He did the pose last week.
He did the pose, and you know how big of a narrative award the Heisman has turned into a little bit. I don't know that there's a better narrative than Vanderbilt, who has traditionally been the bottom of the barrel in the SEC, to the point where even Saban said it on College Game Day, that he's still not comfortable saying that Vanderbilt is good.
Well, I mean, Indiana, Big Ten people feel the same way about Indiana.
Indiana's been the same thing. But I do think there is an avenue where if Vanderbilt gets to the college football playoff, Diego Pavia is probably going to win the Heisman.
Give me a team right now outside of Ohio State, Indiana, A&M, Alabama, off the radar a little bit, that you think has a shot, a sneaky shot to make the playoff. Because I have one for you, and I think they would be dangerous if they got there. But go ahead.
Sneaky shot. So because of you say sneaky, I'll take Georgia Tech out of that. I think they're going to get to the
they're not
championship. They're not sneaky. I do have a 7-1 ticket on them to make the college football playoff, though. So that win against Duke really helped me out. I think it's a team that won this past weekend. I think Arizona State would be scary to a lot of teams. Their quarterback is finally healthy, and that wide receiver, I know we are not in that position yet, Kevin, as Commanders fans and Washington fans, but the wide receiver they have there, Jordan Tyson, is really good. And he beat up on Texas Tech on basically one leg. So
Texas Tech's starter was out.
The starter was out, right? So that does factor into this. But I think that to me was more about how well Arizona State can play when they are also healthy, because this was Levitt's first game back in a couple of weeks. So getting him back into the fray, they had the success last year. Kenny Dillingham's a hell of a coach. I would say Arizona State, who right now is 24th in the country, they're sneaky. But if they get in, I do think that they would cause a couple of teams some problems.
I'm going to go way off the board with this one. If USF makes the playoff, they're going to be hell to deal with.
Yes.
If they are in a playoff game. Byron Brown, their quarterback, is outstanding. They can move the football and score against anybody. They lost to Miami. It's their one loss, and they got handled by Miami in that game.
Right.
The line, remember, was big. Miami seemed like the play.
17.5, I think.
Yeah, but they are annihilating people. We'll see what happens at Memphis this week. Memphis obviously went down to UAB and Chris Mortensen's son, which was a great story. They have to come to Navy. But I think USF is the best of the non-power four and would be a tough out in the postseason.
You think, if you haven't watched USF and you haven't seen Byron Brown, think like a really, really green Josh Allen. Like, he's going to make a bunch of crazy throws. He's going to make a bunch of crazy plays. But one of those crazy throws or crazy plays might be slightly negative. He's not like the most accurate quarterback in the world, but he can use his legs. He is not afraid to lower the shoulder over
He is a big, strong dude like Allen.
He loves the contact. So I think you're right. I think they could be a lot of fun. And I do feel like that Memphis game, I'm kind of bummed that Memphis lost to UAB, because I do think that would have been the game of the week had Memphis still been ranked at that point. But that's going to be a really, really fun one for a noon kick.
Just going back to last week, as you and I were texting during this game, I like Carson Beck. I've always liked Carson Beck. I know that he's apparently a pain in the backside and, got all sorts of, intangible issues. And that game, the most surprising part of that game to me, Miami was undefeated. They lost to Louisville last Friday night at home, 24-21. Carson Beck threw 4 picks in the game. But the most surprising part of that game to me was I really thought Miami had the best trenches team in the country, both sides of the ball, O-line, D-line. They could not run the football, and they could not stop the run against Louisville. And that's the interceptions killed them, no doubt. But they've been able, with Fletcher, number 4, they've been able to run the football, which has made all the other stuff, the play action stuff, which Carson Beck needs some of that to work. And they could not run the football against Louisville.
Yeah, I was stunned by that. Because when you think of Miami, at least on the defensive side, you think of Ruben Bain. And if you're not familiar with that name, Commanders fans.
Top 3, top 5 pick next April.
Yeah, he is going to be very highly sought after when it comes to edge guys in this upcoming year's draft. But I think So I was asked this earlier this week about Cristobal, and I am not like a massive fan of Mario Cristobal.
Right.
I did not think that was Mario Cristobal losing the game for Miami, but their inability to run lost the game for Miami.
I agree.
It felt like playing that final possession, they were playing for overtime, which I thought was a smart thing to do. If you feel like you're more talented, get the thing to overtime, give yourself more opportunities. But because they couldn't run the football, you're forcing your quarterback, who had already thrown at that point 3 interceptions, to throw when you're just trying to gain, very small yardage. You're not throwing deep down the field. You're not going for the end zone. You're literally just trying to get as close as possible for your kicker. And Louisville was really prepared for that, I thought. Brom is a winner, as you know. He was
such a good coach.
Famous in the Big Ten with Purdue for beating teams that they had no real rhyme or reason to be beating. Right. And to see him continue to do that now, I know Louisville is the place for him because he went there. He has deep ties to Louisville. But as we get closer and closer to the inevitable Super League, I do wonder, with all of these big jobs opening up back in the Big Ten, in the SEC, if his number is going to start to get called when certain guys like Lane Kiffin end up potentially saying no to some of these schools.
All right, let's look at some of the games this week. I wanted to start with Tennessee. Oklahoma, Ole Miss is a noon kick. Ole Miss lost the game to Georgia, really the game of the day last week. Mm-hmm. Hell of a football game. I had Georgia laying the 7. I have no idea how they covered. But Mateer was a little bit better last week at South Carolina. They are exceptional defensively, too. They are favored by 6 in this game in Norman against Ole Miss. Is this it for Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss if they go down? I think there's a chance they do. What do you think?
If they go down, this is going to be it. I don't know. Now, so let me just say this. They do have the benefit of a still tough schedule, but that schedule doesn't look anywhere near as frightening now as it once did. At the beginning of the year, South Carolina was highly ranked. At the beginning of the year, Florida was highly ranked. Well, those 2 teams aren't highly ranked anymore. Mississippi State has had some big wins this year compared to what they normally can accomplish. But this is your last opportunity, if you're Ole Miss, to have a ranked quality win. And then you would then have 2 losses. You're not going to get to the SEC championship game. And then you're looking back and saying, well, you beat LSU, but that would be your only ranked win. And that's kind of tough to argue. Lane Kiffin will do his best. You'll get on Twitter. Those fingers will be firing away on Twitter. He'll do his best to try and argue, but that puts yourself in a really, really tough spot. They desperately need this. I feel like this game, Kevin, is going to be the game of the week because it is 2 desperate teams. Because you can say the exact same thing for Oklahoma. Now, they have a much tougher schedule coming up, which gives them the opportunity to have bigger wins. They got Tennessee after this, Bama after that, Missouri and LSU. But if you start stacking losses, if you're Oklahoma, do you really think you're going to run the table with those being your final 4 games? They do not have the benefit of the traditional SEC layup week. Like Ole Miss has the Citadel still on their schedule. They can name their score against the Citadel. Oklahoma does not have that, so they need this win too. It's going to be a matchup of 2 desperate teams, and those are the games that I like. I know the argument when they expanded the playoff was, well, these games aren't going to matter. This game matters. This game desperately matters to 2 teams that have been pretty good this year. I do like Oklahoma. I was big on Ole Miss like 2 weeks ago. I like Oklahoma.
Yeah, I do too. There are a couple of games that sort of stand out. I want to ask you about one game that is not like a big game this week, but I think Bryce Underwood is getting better week by week. Yeah. And I think Michigan is going to be, I think they're an improving team. They've got 2 losses. Remember, they lost early against Oklahoma, and then they lost to SC in the Coliseum.
They lost to SC pretty handedly.
But, I thought he looked overwhelmed early in the year. And then last week against Washington, I thought he looked really good. I think he's doing a good job. What do you think of Michigan right now at 5-2?
They're going to be just good enough by the end of the season to make that Ohio State game intriguing. I still don't think they're going to be awesome. I think they'll beat Michigan State because Michigan State isn't good. But I think as we get closer and closer, if Bryce Underwood starts to have better games statistically, that is obviously going to drive some interest to them. I mean, they have, after Michigan State, like the next 4 games for them, if you include Michigan State leading up to Ohio State, that's kind of what you want leading up to Ohio State, right? You're going up against teams that aren't fantastic, and you would think that at least some of these would be what you consider getting right games for your quarterback. I don't know if get right is the proper phrase to use for him because it's not like he's been, spectacularly right already, but just kind of ramping up to what big time competition is going to look like. So I think he's getting better. I think they're trusting him a lot more with some of the things that they're doing offensively. And I think that's been a huge help. And you now have the benefit of you still have a good defense. So you can allow for a little bit more wiggle room for your quarterback to not feel like he has as much pressure to go out there and perform perfectly on a weekly basis.
Real quickly, Virginia, I don't know what has gotten into Washington State. They nearly beat Ole Miss, and then they nearly knocked off Virginia. But Virginia's still very much kind of in the driver's seat, with games that I think that they will be favored in. Maybe not at Duke. The at Duke thing is going to be interesting, but Duke has not come through in those spots in which they looked like they would be coming through Do you think Virginia ends up being an undefeated ACC team and potentially in the ACC title game? I forget how the tiebreakers work there.
They would, with Miami losing to Louisville, they would get in. It would be Virginia and Georgia.
Well,
Tech.
SMU's still undefeated too, right?
SMU they're playing better, but they have not played a ton of ACC. Like the way their schedule lined up was like really odd with ACC competition. I think UVA is good. I don't think UVA is great. Washington State is like this weird litmus test for teams that I thought were good because I thought Ole Miss coming off of LSU was just going to blow the doors off of Washington State, and they didn't. I thought UVA was going to blow the doors off of Washington State, and they didn't. They have the benefit of having a quarterback that is not afraid of these moments because he's kind of used to playing in big games, when he was at TCU. So I do think that the quarterback gives them an advantage, and it also helps that you're playing UNC this week, and they suck. They're a bad football team. Who could have possibly
They got the cover for me last Friday night.
They did get the cover, though, right? A little bit of ACC after dark.
They should have won the game.
They should have.
They fumbled going into the end zone at the end.
I mean,
for the win.
Kudos to Ron Rivera getting a nice win over Bo Belichick.
Ron Rivera was interviewed during the game on the sideline. He's the GM of Cal Sports.
He is the general manager. Talent guy right there. We know that.
That's really a good job for him.
Big talent guy.
All right, give me your best bets this weekend.
So I do like Vanderbilt to lay 2.5 against Missouri. That line's a little bit shorter than I thought it was going to be. But I do like them. I kind of like Iowa State laying 2.5 against BYU. I mean, I know when you're looking at these, that one jumps off to you immediately. Maybe you can get something with Washington laying 3.5 against Illinois. Our process here. When we see these unranked teams at home laying numbers against ranked teams, you have to go with the unranked team because the public is going to be the opposite. I'm going to have a pretty sizable number on Oklahoma laying 5.5. I'm trying to think of some of these other ones. I do like South Florida against Memphis as well. So I think South Florida is definitely going to be one that I put some money on. We'll see if I do anything with Texas A&M and LSU. Maybe like an under play, that 48.5 for a team in LSU that can't score very well. An under feels comfortable there because I don't think the Texas A&M is going to hang 30 on LSU. So maybe an under in that one, but I don't know if I love a side.
LSU couldn't stop Vandy. I mean, they could not stop them. That was their biggest issue. Crazy. All right. I'm just looking through to see where the upset is. I think, certainly Iowa State over BYU looks like a potential. For those that don't know, BYU is undefeated, ranked 11th in the country.
Yeah.
Iowa State is getting healthier off of 2 losses. And then the Texas A&M LSU game will be an interesting game. I mean, you threw out Arizona State. Houston's getting less than a touchdown on the road in Tempe.
Yeah, that's a late one too. That'll be a late
Not
night.
super late. 8 o'clock I'm looking
late,
at.
But late.
I would have loved
also,
for that to have been like a 10 o'clock.
I should tell the audience, your boy's not doing overtime this weekend. I'll be 9 to noon this weekend. A little bit of a schedule change with one of the other guys, so I'm doing the morning show.
You're working the highlight show, the non-highlight show, the preview show.
The actual get to do radio show. Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So
because the other show, you're basically just reacting in live time to all the games that are going on.
Pretty much. Right. And by the way, another voice on that show, Mad Max produces that show.
That's right, baby.
Yep. And you do that with Bobby Carpenter, former Ohio State linebacker.
Correct. Also Dallas Cowboy. I hated Bobby when I was younger.
Yeah, true.
I told him that once, and he didn't think it was as funny as I did.
See ya. I'll talk to you later.
Right, see ya.
Denton Day, everybody. Up next, Charch will jump on. We'll talk fantasy football tips for the weekend. Charch is with us every Thursday in this spot. At Paul Charchian on X, on Twitter. Give him a follow. He is a world-renowned fantasy football expert with phenomenal podcasts called Fantasy Football Weekly and Chop. You can get those wherever you get your podcasts. Decent Thursday night game. You know, the Thursday night run that we are on here is amazing, especially with underdogs kind of winning outright. You know, Flacco's performance last week, the Giants the week before that. It's been the week before that, the 49ers, remember, as a big underdog with all the injuries winning in L.A. We had the Seattle walk-off field goal. We've had good Thursday night football games this year. That's always been a complaint, but the games have been great.
Yeah, and they don't always look like they're going to be great on paper and heading into them. As we're talking on Thursdays, we're kind of trying to scrounge up some way to make it sound interesting. But at the end of the day, they've been good games, like you said, a bunch of upsets, and this one could be one-sided tonight. And maybe there's some Viking fatalist in me because I am a lifelong Viking fan and I embrace for bad things to happen. And so, maybe I'm going to turn out to be wrong on this, but Kevin, I don't like the Vikings here, and I think they're going to struggle in this matchup. There's a lot not to like, unfortunately.
I think I asked you this last week, but is there a lot of Vikings regret over not bringing Sam Darnold back?
Oh God, yes. There's a lot in this town, and the funny thing is, mostly at the time, the Vikings were coming off these two bad games at the end of the year for the Vikings. They had
cost them a lot of money.
Listeners recall a lot. They had 14 wins rolling into the final regular season game against the Lions to see if they're going to be the 1 seed or the 5 seed in the NFC. And they needed a big game. The offensive line was terrible. Darnold took, I think, 9 sacks in one game.
It was ugly.
And it was brutal. And then in the playoff game, the subsequent playoff game, Darnold also very bad, and the offensive line was bad. But everybody blamed Darnold because he's the quarterback, right? Your quarterback's going to take the blame first and foremost. And so when there were a lot of people at that point that were just disgusted by the idea of bringing Darnold back, and you had this top 10 pick in J.J. McCarthy, and everybody wanted to see what he had going. So they decided to go with McCarthy. But as it turns out now, it looks like, and it's still early, we really don't know very much about McCarthy. But Kevin, this team had in the building, they had not only Sam Darnold, they had Daniel Jones. They are both MVP candidates right now. They also had Aaron Rodgers lobbying to come to the Vikings. He didn't want to go to the Steelers. He wanted to come to Minnesota, throw balls to Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison and TJ Hawkinson. And the Vikings were not interested in him either. So they threaded the needle to get their way to J.J. McCarthy as their starting quarterback. And to this point, he's only been able to play through the year and a half he's been on roster for 8 quarters, 7 of which have been bad.
Yeah. The only one that wasn't was the fourth quarter in the Monday night opener in Chicago.
Exactly.
In some of these trade deadline NFL stories, because we're coming up on the trade deadline, I have seen a lot of, and I'm sure you have too, Kirk back to Minnesota. That's not going to happen, right? I don't think Atlanta's going to trade him. And I think they want to keep him because of Penix's potential, health issues.
Yeah, although short-term health issues, Penix has a good chance of playing, although they don't need him.
Yeah, but he's had injury issues. He had injury issues in college.
Yeah, that's true. But the real reason that trade's not happening is that Cousins is making $26.5 million this year.
Right.
And so, the Falcons would have to eat a ton of it to make that trade happen. And I don't think the Vikings organizationally have got the fortitude to bring in somebody who's going to already muddy the waters because, already there's rampant belief among Viking fans that this is a soft benching for J.J. McCarthy because we were originally told his ankle sprain was at worst going to be 4 weeks. Now it looks like it's going to be a 6-week injury. And if you thought it was going to be 6 weeks, you would have put him on IR and he probably would have had surgery on it day 1 after the injury and would have been back. So, it's already a lot of drama and controversy, and Kirk would only magnify that.
So you think this is a rough night? I mean, look, the Chargers still have major O-line issues. They have really struggled to protect Herbert. They got run last week by the Colts. We're going to have to talk about the Colts here before this conversation is over. But Carson Wentz, the numbers kind of don't tell the whole story from the Philadelphia game, do they?
Oh, he was awful. He was brutal, just spraying balls all over the field, had a pick six against him, missed a couple of easy touchdown throws. I mean, it was a regression for a quarterback who hadn't looked particularly good as a Viking, but he had looked just sort of quasi-capable. But he gave that game away. It was a one touchdown game, and he left touchdowns on the field. And for tonight, part of the reason I believe Justin Herbert's sitting on a good game. You mentioned the offensive line. They probably get Joe Alt back at tackle. That is a huge improvement for them. Vikings pass defense in particular got exposed last week. Now listen to the quarterbacks the Vikings had played leading into tonight's game. They went Caleb Williams into Michael Penix in his fifth ever start, Jake Browning, Aaron Rodgers, Dylan Gabriel. And on paper, the Vikings looked really good against those guys, like most teams would. Then last week, they faced their first proven passer, Jalen Hurts, and he toyed with the Vikings. He had a 4 incompletion game, 3 touchdowns, 326 yards. And, it's one thing for Brian Flores.
Rodgers, by the way, I think had a 3 incompletion game in the Dublin game, wasn't it?
I believe you are correct about that.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. So these veteran quarterbacks, it's one thing for Brian Flores to scramble the brains of Dylan Gabriel and Jake Browning with exotic pre-snap looks. But, Justin Herbert, Aaron Rodgers, Jalen Hurts, that's a totally different story. Nothing that they haven't seen. So I'm nervous. I'm nervous about the Vikings here, and I think Herbert's sitting on a really nice game.
By the way, are people in Minnesota, would they have wanted Dan? Was there any talk about retaining Daniel Jones? No. J.J. McCarthy was always the play.
Yeah, he was always the play. There were people really, including me, really wanted Daniel Jones to accept being a backup in Minnesota because this would have been a primo backup spot. If JJ didn't work out, you get to play with Kevin O'Connell and he had. I mean, here's Daniel Jones as recently as 2 weeks ago saying the reason he's playing so well in Indy is because of Kevin O'Connell in Minnesota and the half season he spent here in Minnesota. Yeah. So, the hope was that he would stay as the emergency fallback, but obviously Daniel Jones did the right thing, getting himself back on the field in Indy, and it's the best story of the year.
So you like Justin Herbert tonight? I would assume that by extension, Keenan Allen, Ladd McConkey are starters as well.
The sneaky play is Quentin Johnston. And by the way, for the bettors out there listening, it's over 41.5 yards as anytime touchdowns plus 170. Here's why. He is a physically imposing receiver, of which there are only a handful of comparables in the league. He's 6'3". He's 215 pounds. He wins contested catches. He boxes out small defenders. The Vikings have only faced 2 similarly built receivers to Quentin Johnston. DK Metcalf,
A.J. Brown.
120, and A.J. Brown. Metcalf, 126 yards and a touchdown. A.J. Brown last week, 121 yards and 2 touchdowns. The Vikings have these 2 small cornerbacks. Byron Murphy, 5'11", 190. Isaiah Rodgers, 5'10", 170 pounds. I mean, Johnson can just outduel those guys.
As long as he can catch the balls that are thrown to him.
Well, there's that, because he is the league's premier ball dropper, and he dropped 2. He was only charged with 1. I thought he dropped 2 last week, but overall this year, he's been much better.
He has been, you're right. He fumbled. Yeah. There was the turning point in the Washington game, because Washington's defense, which might be right there with Dallas's, is the worst in the league. They gave up a big chunk play, and he got popped and he fumbled, and it turned the game around completely because they were getting their ass kicked early in that game against the Chargers. We're talking to Charge. All right, so let's move to Sunday, and we'll end with Monday night. But just tell me, kind of your overall reaction to what the Colts are doing. Do you think they're a legit Super Bowl threat? And then from a fantasy perspective, there are a lot of options, obviously, on that team.
Yeah, a lot of options. Shocking. I mean, I can't believe we're talking about the Colts as a team with a plethora of fantasy options. But keep in mind, one of the big things that they got right, not only signing Daniel Jones, and by the way, Can we rewind to early August when everybody said it was premature to announce Daniel Jones as the starting quarterback over Anthony Richardson?
Right.
It was like, oh, how can you already say that Anthony Richardson isn't good enough to start over Daniel Jones? Oh, all that hand-wringing. That was absurd. Jonathan Taylor is in the middle of having what could be a 2,000-yard rushing season. And, man, did they hit the jackpot in the draft with Tyler Warren. Oh,
I couldn't believe Loveland got picked before him. I mean, Warren, by the way, can throw the ball. He can catch the ball. He can run the ball. But he's headed towards Offensive Rookie of the Year, right? I think so. He's got to be the favorite.
Absolutely in play. He has been the single most consistent offensive rookie out of everybody. We thought Ashton Genty was going to run away with it. He is a non-factor. Tyler Warren has been great. They're getting Michael Pittman's resurgent. Josh Downs hurt right now, but he had been playing well. Just, the guy that you feel best about, and I think you and I may have alluded to this, it's Shane Steichen. I mean, that dude was walking the plank. He was the odds-on favorite. He was either 1 or 2 entering the season, be first coach fired. Now he looks like a shoo-in for Coach of the Year. It just goes to show you if you can be a very good coach laboring under bad quarterbacking, and it reflects badly on you. There's just only so much a coach can do when you have bad quarterbacking.
Yeah, I was listening to Flacco last night, who just is everything about him I like. And he was on a podcast with Fitzpatrick, and he said they asked him about Indy because he was there last year, and he said the reason I went to Indy last year was Shane Steichen. He just said he's so impressive. He absolutely knows what he's doing. And we're seeing that this year with the Colts. I mean, look, I think Kansas City right now is the odds-on favorite to represent the AFC in the Super Bowl. I think they're just healthy, and they're just going to be – I think they're on the verge of taking off. But the Colts probably have the best chance of getting the 1 seed. And so the AFC could actually go through Indy in terms of where you'd have to win, because you just look at what they have the rest of the year. There are a couple of games. They play the Chiefs, by the way, in late November. But Indy's legit. Look at their plus minus on points. They move the football and score against everybody, Charge.
Yes, the offense has been amazing. Defense is starting to show some cracks right now, but they've also got some injuries. Hopefully they get some guys back. But the schedule for them is they look like they're going to be favored in pretty much every remaining game except at Kansas City that you mentioned. I think they'll be favorites everywhere. Sneaky tough game coming up against Atlanta in a couple of weeks, but Indy looks
they got
really good.
Pittsburgh on the road too. Yeah. That's not going to be easy, but yeah.
I don't think so. Can we go back to the Joe Flacco podcast for just a second?
Sure.
In that, he talked about how he used to go into a restaurant or a bar.
Oh, yeah. That was his press conference yesterday,
That was the press conference. Single guy at the bar, drinking a beer by himself, eating a burger.
We have that sound. We have that sound. Max, fire that sound bite from Flacco in his press conference yesterday. Keep in mind, the setup for this is Joe Flacco playing in Cincinnati. He's got kids. I think he's got 4 of them and a wife, and he's away from them. They're back. He didn't take them to Cincinnati because it's a mid-season move. So, he's by himself on the road in Cincinnati, living there, and he had this to say in his press conference yesterday.
Well, the good thing, I guess you could say, is that I was in Cleveland by myself. My family was in New Jersey. We decided to do that this year because last year we decided to do it the other way. And this year we just said, hey, let's keep the kids in their routine and, see how that goes. And there's been challenges with that. I love being there and around them and doing all those things. But at the same time, like, they get in their routine and they're having a lot of fun back at home. And early on in the season, they came out to Cleveland, and they're going to come out to this week's game. And I think there's always a challenge of sitting in a room by yourself and being lonely. So for me, it's trying to find ways to maybe stay over here a little bit longer, and then, just kind of take myself out of that mindset, call home, go sit at a restaurant by myself and realize that, man, that's pretty enjoyable to do. After there's not too many situations. I tell people all the time. I mean, I used to see guys sitting at a bar by themselves, or just sitting by themselves eating and grabbing a little meal, and I'm like, man, I feel so bad for that guy. Like, you almost want to go join him. And now I realize, like, that dude was in heaven.
Yeah, you can cut it from there. I've listened to it a million times. That's the money bite right there. Any parent can relate to that. I remember when my kids were young, and it's like, my wife's taking them up to the beach to see my in-laws, and I can't go, and it's like, oh my God, it's like a vacation being at home alone. Yeah, he's something else, man. He's one of the most likable guys, and has been that way in every locker room that he's been in. And he was phenomenal last week. Phenomenal.
He was. And another situation. You can be a good coach in labor when you don't have the good quarterback. Just functional quarterbacking. How much did Joe Flacco help that team over what Jake Browning had been giving them? It was all you had to do was get functional quarterbacking. And if I'm Flacco, I'd have done exactly what he did, and I would just think, "Where's Jamar Chase? Here comes the ball. Chase.
23 targets. Right? 5 drop passes in the game, too, and he threw for 342. I said, Charch, I came in here Friday morning, and I said, and you and I are very similar in this way, because we love the NFL, and we've watched it our entire lives. We remember so much about it. I said that was one of the most enjoyable games to watch. I don't know if you'll see a game in which 2 quarterbacks use their brain to play at an elite level for 60 minutes, the way Flacco and Rodgers went back and forth at each other. And they're over, they're 40 and 41 years old. And it was just so entertaining and such a pleasure to watch quarterbacking at that level last week. It was amazing.
It really was. And, if you go back to Cleveland, we talked about this last week when we were getting ready for Thursday. Why would Cleveland have made this trade? I mean,
because they're punting on the season.
But are they? I don't know. They just went out and slaughtered Miami. Granted, beating Miami is a big deal, but they weren't gonna.
They were gonna play Gabriel the rest of the way, or Shadur. We'll see how that plays out. But Flacco he wasn't gonna play for them, and they were terrible offensively with him.
Okay.
But to see him
trade him in the division, though.
Well, Tomlin didn't like it. That was for sure. No, he didn't like it at all. All right, let's go to Sunday. Give me the things that you're looking at or that are most interesting with the board on Sunday.
Well, a couple of things. Bo Nix just posted the highest scoring fantasy game of any quarterback all year last week.
Wow.
Almost all of it in the fourth quarter. I had 4 touchdowns, 2 passing, 2 rushing. And here comes Dallas. Think about how implausible this is, Kevin. For one team to rank last in all of these categories against an opposing quarterback. Most passing yards allowed, most passing touchdowns allowed, most opposing quarterback rushing attempts, most opposing quarterback rushing yards, and the most quarterback rushing touchdowns allowed. That's the Dallas defense. The 2 best offenses in the NFL statistically are Dallas and whoever is playing Dallas.
Yeah. I wish we had more offense last week. We just had a shell of the team out there. So you really love everybody, Nix, Dobbins, Sutton, all of them for Denver Sunday.
And the plays, if you're one of the people suffering from the 6 teams on bye, the bye-pocalypse for this 2025 season is this week. Check Troy Franklin and Marvin Mims and their availability in your league. Franklin is the preferred guy because he's on the field a little more, but both he and Mims, great matchups, running primarily from the outside against Dallas. This is I'm not. You guys already know Dallas secondary obviously horrible. So, that's your sneaky bye week plays right there, Franklin and Mims.
Tell me about what Ben Johnson's getting done with DeAndre Swift and the other back they have, Roshan Johnson.
Kyle Monungai.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, number 25. Yeah.
Yes. So, and I'll mention this. Swift has got a groin injury at the moment. We believe he's going to go. But last week, Kyle Monungai, 15 touches last week, almost out of nowhere. He'd been getting like 5 touches a game. He goes to 15, and he looked really good. And actually, Swift has looked way better as well lately. Ben Johnson's offense seems to be hitting its stride. Defense is getting better. But more on a groin injury side, I see Monangai and Swift turning into Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery for Ben Johnson. He's rebuilding the two backs that he had with the Lions now for the Bears. Monangai had a career-high 39% rush share against the Saints last week. He's got Baltimore coming up. Their run defense has been terrible this year. So there's, he could be building another Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery there. And Kyle Monangai, probably already rostered in your fantasy league if they're paying attention. If not, be sure to go get him too.
You want to hear something interesting about Kyle Monangai? He was a 7th-round pick out of Rutgers this past April. Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt was a 7th-rounder as well. And because, over the summer, a lot of our fans are like, this dude's going to be, the next Emmitt Smith. We tend to jump to pretty big conclusions before they've played games yet around here. But I went back and I looked at the last 10 years of 7th-round running backs, and only one drafted in the 7th round over the last 10 drafts entering this year's draft has been a meaningful contributor. Isaiah Pacheco.
Yeah,
Isaiah Pacheco.
Also
Rutgers.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. And Pacheco is, it almost never works out for 7th rounders. And I believe, fantasy guys have looked into this a lot. The tier on which you can, where the fall off happens about round 5, where guys after round 5 are very unlikely to make a meaningful impact. But Pacheco has been that guy. Now, Pacheco looked terrible for most of the season, but it's changed the last couple of weeks. And I think it maybe it's just last year's injury took until now, but Pacheco's ramping back up, and he is a good buy low candidate right now. Isaiah Pacheco, Kareem Hunt's dinged up, and he's been terrible.
I think part of it too is getting Xavier Worthy back, and now Rashee Rice. Now you can't load the box against Kansas City. They've got receivers. All right, let's finish up with that. First of all, have you ever seen a box score like Chiefs over Raiders Sunday? Have you looked at it?
Yeah, well, the Raiders ran the 3rd fewest plays since in the Super Bowl era, right?
30 offensive snaps in the game, 3 first downs, and 95 total yards.
Oh, unbelievable ineptitude.
Unbelievable. It's an all-time 30 first downs to 3, 434 yards to 95. The Chiefs also gave up. The 4th quarter, they ran the clock out. I mean, it was like a running clock situation, like it was a CYO game. But with that said, let's go to Monday night real quickly. Washington's defense, I don't care what your numbers say, it is horrific right now. And they just lost maybe their best defensive player this season in Dorrance Armstrong. So if Mahomes and Worthy and Rice and Pacheco aren't high on your list, they should be. I don't know how we keep them under 35.
Mahomes, my number 1 ranked quarterback for this week. So Rashee Rice is sitting at wide receiver 3. This is and Rice, hit the ground running literally, and he looked so natural in that offense, and he's so good after the catch. Rice is just a beast. They love throwing to him over the middle of the field where he's got this run. He'll line up in the slot. He'll slant into the middle of the field. Here comes a laser from Mahomes, and Rashee Rice is just so big. He just beats guys down. I love Rice in this matchup, and it's going to be a long day for your squad, I believe. Who's playing quarterback on Monday?
Marcus Mariota. Jaden's out.
A done deal.
Night.
It's a done deal. Okay, so it's not just rumor. That's fact. Okay. Well.
Yeah. Fair point. It was reported by Rappaport initially, so you take that. Okay. We've not heard from Quinn definitively on it. I don't think so, but a lot of our local guys sort of confirmed it, I think, with the team, and so we'll hear it officially in about 30 minutes or so from Dan Quinn. All right, man. Always great. Appreciate it.
Love it. We'll talk to you next week. Bye, Kevin.
All right. Paul Charchian, everybody. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the Team980.com.
All right, here's what's happening. It is Thursday, October 23rd, and the big news of the day, the FBI has announced a number of arrests have been made in relation to illegal gambling on sports and poker operations allegedly tied to the Italian mafia. Included among 34 defendants arrested Portland Trailblazers head coach Chauncey Billups and former Miami Heat guard Terry Rozier. Wizards last night, they took the L to the Bucks in Chris Middleton's first game back in Milwaukee since being traded last season. The former Bucks forward led the Wizards in scoring with 23.6 rebounds and 3 assists, but the defense for the Wizards largely came up short early with 72 points allowed in the first half. Wizards fall 133-120. This update is sponsored by the Team 980 YouTube page. Just open the app, type in the Team 980, hit subscribe. Kevin Sheehan is live every day from 10 to 1. You can catch Denton's office throughout all football season. Don't forget to hit the like button whenever you do decide to join us and turn on notifications to stay up to date on all things DC sports. And that is what's trending.
So I was just texting back and forth with someone. We'll just refer to that someone as someone offshore that I know pretty well, because I was wondering the difference in point spreads Monday night if Jaden were playing versus Marcus Mariota. He said the line was 5.5 before the games on Sunday. The way the Chiefs dominated the Raiders and then the way Washington was dominated by Dallas, even if Jaden finishes that game and they still lose, the line goes to 7.5. And he said it's at 12.5, 13 right now. So the difference essentially between Mariota starting and Jaden Daniels starting from an odds maker standpoint is roughly 6 points. I think we did something on that before the season started, talking about backups versus starters and how a starter being out would impact the point spread. I think Josh Allen had the biggest delta with his backup, followed by Mahomes, and then I think Jaden was in the next tier. But basically, they'd be about a 7 to 7.5 point favorite if he were playing. With him not playing, they are a 12.5 to 13 point. I'm sorry, underdog. They'd be a 7 to 7.5 point underdog if he were playing. They're 12.5 to 13 without him playing. Joining me right now to talk some NFL is JP Acosta. JP writes for CBSSports.com. You can follow JP on X on Twitter at Acosta32 _ JP. He recently wrote about the Chiefs and the return of Rashee Rice to the lineup last week. First of all, I'll ask you what I asked my last guest, JP. Have you ever seen, as an NFL fan, a more lopsided box score than the Raiders-Chiefs game on Sunday?
I honestly don't think I have. I know the score might only look like only 31-0, but everything about that game was over from the minute it started. I mean, the fact that the Chiefs had 30 first downs compared to the Raiders running 30 total plays. I was watching the tape of the game on all 22, and it took me maybe like 10 minutes to get through the Raiders offense. So that's unprecedented, and it's an unprecedented levels of lopsided that I've seen.
Yeah, I've never seen 30-3 first downs, 77-30 plays. I think it's the third fewest plays, my last guest told me, in the Super Bowl era to be run by a team. And the Chiefs basically, as you know, just stopped playing in the fourth quarter. I mean, they didn't want to get anybody hurt. They just, handed the ball off. It could have been 41 or 45 points and 40 first downs to like 4 or something like that. It was insane for sure. So what has the return of, actually beyond just Rashee Rice, Xavier Worthy, meant to the Chiefs?
So I think for both guys, with Xavier Worthy and Rashee Rice, they help create layers for the offense in Kansas City. What Rashee Rice does for Kansas City is he gives them someone who can win in the slot against man coverage, against press coverage, and he gives them basically on all their RPOs, he is their RPO guy after the catch. He turns those catches at the line of scrimmage, those screen passes into 6-yard gains. It helps keep their offense on schedule. Xavier Worthy is the guy who separates downfield. He's the guy that you design the explosive plays for. He's the guy that you design plays to get him running away from safeties and corners. But Rashee Rice is important because on plays where they need a bucket, when they need it's man coverage, they're playing press, they go to Rashee Rice. So I think they're going to have an ability to extend. They're going to have the ability to play matchup ball now with Rashee Rice back in the lineup, because they have so many different guys who win in different ways.
I mean, I'm just thinking about Rice on Monday night in the slot. Mikey Sanderstill has really struggled this year to cover, and he's been moved into the slot, which is where they drafted him to play, but he played primarily on the outside last year out of need, and played better. That could be an absolute nightmare. Do you think of the Chiefs today like many are starting to, think about them, and that is as the front runner, even at 4-3, to be the representative from the AFC in the Super Bowl?
It's hard to choose anybody else right now, simply because of how dominant that Chiefs offense has been now that everybody's back. I was a little worried about their defense, even while they were going through some of their offensive woes, but if the offense is going to put up 38 points a game, then it's going to be hard to keep up with them anyways. I think their secondary and their linebacker core has played really well since week 4. Nick Bolton's been truly playing inspired football. I still don't think they have enough pass rush, but with Spags and with Chris Jones, all you need is one moment from each of those guys, and they'll be able to get the ball back to the offense. So I think they're still the AFC favorites, even with 3 losses, because now they're getting everybody back, everybody's healthy, and it looks like the Chiefs' offense of old.
You know, you mentioned obviously in Spagnuolo and Chris Jones, you've got, 2 guys that have, been there, done that. I'm such a huge Karlaftis fan, and I'm looking at it right now. He's got 3.5 sacks through 7 games, and you said about their pass rush not super impressive. Why hasn't their pass rush been impressive this year?
So I think the thing about the Chiefs' pass rush is they have one quick winner in Chris Jones.
Yeah.
The other guys in that pass rush unit work to funnel the quarterback to Chris Jones. They are all pocket pushers. You think about Charles Omenihu. You think about George Karlaftis. Those guys don't win with speed.
Right.
They win with strength and trying to run.
Karlaftis is like Ryan Kerrigan number 2. Like every time I watch him, I think I'm watching Ryan Kerrigan.
Yes, he's going to win with speed. He's going to win with power. He's going to win with violence. He's going to try and convert that length to power. They don't have a guy who can get around the corner. They don't have a guy who can win with bend. So I think they just need another – it's like having a pitching staff with all knuckleballers right now with the Chiefs defensive line outside of Chris Jones. They need somebody who can throw 98. They need somebody who can go tip the scales as a pass rusher with juice. So I think if they get another guy with speed, that was supposed to be Omar Norman Lott from defensive tackle spot, but he tore his ACL. So you need somebody with speed. You need somebody with juice to help as a complement to all the other power guys they have on the roster.
We're going to talk about the rest of the league. My intention was not to just focus on the Chiefs, but you wrote about them. You obviously know a lot about the Chiefs, and that is our team's next opponent on Monday night. Do you know much about this Josh Simmons story? For those that don't know what I'm talking about, remember Josh Simmons, the lineman from Ohio State. The Skins had a chance to draft him. They drafted Connerly Jr. instead. Josh Simmons plugged into the starting lineup and played well early in the season, and now essentially has gone AWOL. What's the story with Josh Simmons?
I wish I knew. I wish I had intel for you. I like most of everybody else, I don't know what's going on. And all we truly do is hope for the best with Josh Simmons, who, like we said, was playing incredible football before he left. So all we can really do is hope that he's okay.
Yeah, sure.
Hope that he's doing all right, he and his family. So that's really all that I can say about what's happening with Josh Simmons.
Yeah, it's a mystery. He's missed the last 3 games now. And he apparently there was a family issue, but he's not back. It really, to your point, hopefully everything, works out. Thinking about their offensive line, by the way, Jawan Taylor, basically has led the league in false starts for like 3 straight years. We all get to watch the Chiefs so much, and 74 is called, it seems like, multiple times per game of either, lining up, in the backfield, essentially, is their tackle, or false starting. Hopefully we get a couple of those. Has he been better at that this year? Do you know?
I think it's still been an issue for him with the false start. That's always going to be an issue with the illegal motion, with the way that he lines up in his stance. Where he's comfortable is basically getting as far back as possible to give himself as much space as possible before guys try and beat him with speed. So he's still having issues with false starts, having issues with flags, but where they kind of mitigate that pressure and mitigate those issues is like getting the ball out so quickly. And if Patrick Mahomes is a built-in run game at this point in his career where he's just taking off scrambling. So they do a good job of mitigating the issues that Jawan Taylor's had.
Yeah, I probably shouldn't talk. I think Laramie Tunsil last year led the league in false starts, but I just pulled up the numbers. Jawan Taylor, currently the second most penalized player in the league. He's got 7 total. 2 of them are false starts, but 2 of them are illegal formations. 4 of them are holding. We are talking to CBSSports.com's JP Acosta. What do you make of our team from afar?
So the Commanders, I have questions about some of the sustainability for the Commanders, especially on the defensive side of the ball. And the biggest issue with last year compared to this year is they've made the bet that the veterans on defense would help lift everybody else on that side of the ball, and their veterans just haven't been good this year. Marshawn Lattimore has not been good in coverage. He has been picked on a lot by every team in coverage. He just looks like he doesn't have the speed anymore. And Bobby Wagner gets picked on in passing coverage as well, which is an issue because of how much teams like to isolate their best players against linebackers and safeties. I do think that Daron Payne, Javon Kinlaw have each had nice moments, but it becomes null and void when your secondary and your pass coverage has as many holes as the Commanders' defense does. And because there are so many holes everywhere, you can't put them all out.
No, they are in big trouble defensively. They've also lost their, perhaps best player this year defensively in Dorrance Armstrong. He tore his ACL in Dallas. They've lost their top 3 defensive ends. We're wondering, who's going to line up at defensive end on Monday night. That is certainly an issue. All right, let's look at kind of you actually let me ask you about Drake May and the Patriots, because you last wrote about them. I think everybody watches Drake May and says, wow, what a season he is having. He's actually probably putting his name into the mix for potential MVP. I don't think he's going to win the MVP, but he could be in the mix. They've also played apparently the weakest schedule in the history of the NFL through 7 games. And if it holds up, we'll play the softest schedule in NFL history. So what's real and what isn't with the Patriots and Drake May?
I think what's real with Drake May and the Patriots is how good he is throwing the ball downfield. He's basically throwing 40-yard handoffs at this point. He is one of only, I think, a couple of quarterbacks in the NFL this year with a completion percentage on 20-plus yards of over 70%, which is unheard of at this point in the season. And Drake May, where he also wins with the Patriots, is he has the ability to scramble and has the ability to make off-schedule plays, which is super helpful because the Patriots' offensive line still has not been great, which is why I sort of wonder what's real and what's not with the Patriots' offense, because they haven't faced a defensive line that's going to be a legit player in the NFL since week 2 in the Steelers. But even in that Steelers game, if they don't fumble 5 times, they probably win the game. So I'm curious about their game against Cleveland this Sunday, not because I think Cleveland is going to win,
but the defense.
Cleveland's defensive line is going to give the Patriots a lot of problems.
Yeah, I mean, it's done that to everybody. One of the things that I didn't know until before this segment, because I was going to ask you about this, as great as May has been, he is second in the league in sacks taken. Do you think that's more him or the O-line, or a combination of both?
I think it's always going to be a combination of both. It depends. Sometimes Drake May, early in the season, was trying to extend plays and dropping his eyes and missing guys in the middle of the field. But I do think that offensive line is still going through a lot of growing pains. The left side of the offensive line is entirely rookies. Jared Wilson, Will Campbell, 2 of their first 3 or 4 picks in this year's draft are starting on the offensive line. Jared Wilson has not been good to start his career. I actually think he's more of a center than a guard, but they paid Garrett Bradbury, who's also playing center right now. So I think where they have struggled is communication on pass rush games and stunts. That's where if you see pressure with Drake May and the Patriots, is coming from a pass rush game because they can't really communicate well right now. So I think for them, it has to come with reps. It has to come with playing together and learning what each guy is good at. So I'm curious on how they grow to defend and protect these pass rush games moving forward so they can keep their quarterback upright.
We live in an era of recency bias. What you see one week, you declare is the thing that will hold up forever. And that's a dangerous game in the NFL for sure. But with Drake May's ascendance here and Jaden having, not the year he had last year for a number of reasons, he hasn't, had a bad year so far. I'm just curious, are you at that point where you're ready to jump in and say what some are starting to say, and that is when we look back on the 2024 draft, it'll go May 1st and then Daniels, or not?
I think I want to see the rest of the season play out, largely because Jaden Daniels hasn't been healthy. Like he has missed games due to injury, and that sucks. That's because even when Daniels did play, he was still very good. But the fact that he's not playing, it doesn't really give him a fair shot in this discussion. Just like how when we had this discussion last year, Drake May only played the back half of the season. He didn't have a lot of playing time in his rookie year. So I would say if we want to do redrafts, if we want to talk about who's going first overall, let's wait until after the end of year 3, and then we can discuss it.
That's far too sensible for most people. Far too sensible. But it's the right answer. You got to wait at least. Well, quarterbacks, I think you have to wait even longer. But on drafts, you have to wait at least 3 years, I think, for the most part, to have a real feel for whether or not it was a good one or a bad one. JP Acosta from CBSSports.com joining us. All of our NFL conversation on this show brought to you by Paramount Plus. You can't count on much, but you can always count on Sundays with the NFL on CBS and Paramount Plus. Watch your local NFL game live every Sunday all season long. Visit ParamountPlus.com/NFL to get started today. So I want to start with the AFC North and just go around the league with you a little bit. Pittsburgh lost that classic game last Thursday night to Cincinnati and Joe Flacco. The Bengals have a nice soft part of the schedule coming up to maybe hang in there for Burrow. People have not given up on the Ravens. When we get to the end of the season, who sits atop the AFC North?
Man, it feels like any answer you have here outside of Cleveland can be a very it makes sense. But I will say the Ravens have both of their Pittsburgh games closer to the end of the season.
Right.
If they can get
Same with the Bengals games.
Healthy.
Same with the Bengals games, both of them.
Yes. If they can get to the end, if the Ravens can get to the end of the season healthy, and this is also dependent on this Sunday. If Lamar Jackson is healthy this Sunday, I do think the Ravens can still make a run because their offense is that good. I just worry with the Bengals. The Bengals defense still is not a good unit, and neither is the Ravens. But I think Lamar Jackson being back earlier than what Joe Burrow might potentially be coming back to, I think that gives me more confidence in the Ravens if we're looking for somebody to upset the Steelers and take the division from them. But right now it feels like Pittsburgh's built a pretty good lead despite having a defense that is the highest paid unit in the NFL and still not playing well. So if there's anybody that I think takes the crown from Pittsburgh this season, I think it's Baltimore. But even then, I want to see if Lamar Jackson's going to be legitimately healthy first.
Indianapolis, real or not?
I spent most of this season wondering that same question. I kind of think the offense is real. I think this offense can put up points with anybody, and it's because of how well that offensive line is playing and how well Coach Shane Steichen is drawing up plays to get the stars in the best positions possible. So that offense is very real. I do worry about the defense. I have questions about the sustainability at corner because Charvarius Ward is hurt, because they don't have a lot of depth in the secondary. But Lou Anarumo is doing his magic. He's working really well with a veteran group. I still think they could use some more pass rush pop from the edge. But we're going to find out real quick if the Colts are real as a team. They had a great win against the Chargers, but after their bye week, they play Kansas City. They play Seattle. They have Houston twice and Jacksonville twice after their bye week. Yeah. So we're going to find out if this team is real or not, but I do think the offense is legit.
Is Denver a team that can win the division, or is KC just going to be too good and they've got both games against the Broncos still?
I think Denver has the defense too. I think their defense, it can travel. I think their defense has the guys who play man coverage and the pressure to really affect Patrick Mahomes. It's all about if Bo Nix can hit the downfield throws. That has been the worst part of his game for the last couple of years is he can't hit downfield passes. If you can't be explosive against this Chiefs defense, if you can't create explosives, then you're not going to stick in a game against Kansas City because their offense is going to find a way to score. They're always going to find a way to put at least 25 points on the board. So if you can't match them, then I wonder if the Broncos will ever be able to pass the Chiefs in this division. They just need to get Bo Nix and this offense to generate explosive plays.
The NFC's deep. I mean, it's really loaded when you think about it. 3-5-2 teams in the NFC West. You know, Tampa's a really good team in the NFC South. I think Atlanta's very talented. The NFC North has Detroit and Green Bay, and Chicago's, quietly won 4 in a row. The NFC East has Philly. I don't know how that'll work out, but right now, as we approach the halfway mark of the season, give me your top 3 NFC teams in order.
Oh man, top 3 NFC teams in order. I think hesitantly, I'm going to say Seattle as number 1 because I think their defense is playing really well despite not having most of their guys in the secondary yet. And Sam Darnold and Jackson Smith-Njigba are playing some of the best football of their careers, respectively. Then at 2, I'm probably going to say Philadelphia because they're just too talented. They're too talented to slip up. They're too talented to not go deep into the playoffs. And then the third team, I'm going to say it's tough between the Packers and the Bucks, but I'm going to say the Packers right now because they're just healthier. They're just healthier right now. They have less holes, and they have Micah Parsons who can fill every hole on defense. And the Bucks, I just want to see what their team looks like when they have Bucky Irving, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Luke Gedeke, and their defenders back. They haven't been a healthy team at all this season. So I want to see if they can get healthy closer to playoff time, because if they can, I do think they'll be a little higher. But right now, I'd say the Packers.
You didn't even mention Detroit. That's surprising to me.
That's the team. That's the team I forgot about. Okay. So
you did forget about them.
I did forget about them, but because of how they've played, I would honestly put them ahead of Seattle at 1.
Okay.
So I go Detroit, Seattle, Philadelphia.
Right. It's look, I mean, no mention of the 49ers, no mention of the Rams. This is going to be fun in the NFC. Last year, the 7 seed was Green Bay at 11-6. And I think we could end up with something like that this year, where, the final wild card is no less than 10 wins, more likely no less than 11 when all is said and done. JP, thanks. Really enjoyed it. Appreciate it.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
There is a stat that we kind of mentioned from over the weekend about Washington's offense that I want to share with you. Steve Suter, I'm going to play some of his film breakdown from my podcast yesterday, and we still have NFL Power Rankings and Dan Quinn's first press conference of the week to go. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the team980.com. All right, Dan Quinn is going to address the media for the first time, this week or since Monday at 12:50. So we will start with that at the end of the show, so you'll hear the update specifically announced by the team rather than having it been reported on Jaden Daniels and maybe a few other things. I wanted to play a portion of the breakdown of the film by my guy, Steve Suter. If you're not familiar with Steve, he's been doing it for me all year long on the podcast, and we're taking, each week parts of it and running it here on the radio station. Steve is one of the greatest punt returners in NCAA history and in ACC history, calls the Maryland games with Johnny Holiday, does a great job, and he is phenomenal breaking down the film. It's funny because he's not, he used to be a big Skins fan, not as much anymore. So a lot of the, stuff that happens during the week, I think you'll hear the exchange when I tell him that Dorrance Armstrong's lost for the season, how shocked he was and how upset he was. But this is the first 10 minutes of the conversation with Steve, where he just tells you kind of overall his big takeaways after watching the all 22 of the game on Sunday in Dallas.
Well, I would say my first thought is, and not a shocker here, but they're just beat up. Commanders are banged up on both sides of the ball, and it's wearing them down. And you just have what doing this all 22 has done for me, and breaking down these games is really realizing how a 52-man roster is just not a lot of players.
53, yeah.
53. You get into second and third string, and you just see talent drop off, and there's not enough depth that you can keep at every position and anticipate where the injury is going to go. So it's not like college. You got 115 guys on a roster that you can comb through. Now there's depth issues there too, but this is just kind of a glaring eye-opening experience for me, just to see when you got guys that go down, who's coming in, who's filling in. And Washington's going through what appears like 10 defensive linemen here in the games that I've gone through. So that's just a lot of guys you got to go through.
You know what? I didn't tell you this before we started. Armstrong tore his ACL. He's done for the year.
Stop it. Oh, my gosh. Oh, dude. You guys are toast.
You guys.
I'm sorry to laugh about it.
Yeah.
But
because he's been your favorite player. He and Kinlaw have been your
best player.
Yeah.
He's been the best player on defense all season. And now, man, I didn't know that. I saw him get hurt. I saw him tweak the knee, but I did not know it was an ACL. That is very unfortunate. So, goodness.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'll take that information into account. Yeah, that's a big blow. So, offensively, all right, I'll just go back. Offensively, banged up too, right out on the perimeter. No shocker there. You got nobody to get beat man coverage. If you heard the broadcast and as you were listening to it, they were commenting how Dallas runs zone, and then now they're just going to put a bunch of man. Well, I said, well, that's not obvious, or that's obvious to me. You and I talked about it. He asked me how to defend Washington on offense. I said I'd play man coverage on them on the outside so they could show they had somebody that could beat it. And they don't, especially with Debo going out. So they came out, Dallas did, man coverage, like you heard on the broadcast, locking down the outside. Now, there were some opportunities, though, for people that did get open. Lane shockingly got open a couple of times in man coverage. Jaden missed him, didn't see the read or threw a bad ball. So there were some opportunities, but then Dallas throughout the game went back to their zone coverage because they had the lead. They didn't have to worry about giving up a big chunk play on a man coverage where somebody gets beat or fall down. So that just seemed like a coaching strategy to me. Once they took the lead, they went back to what they were comfortable doing, playing zone the rest of the game, and Washington couldn't do anything with it because they couldn't establish a run like they had been doing earlier in the season. So they had to rely on passing. And Jaden, we'll get into specifics, but Jaden probably had his worst game that I've watched. And it goes from not executing on just throws. He was inaccurate most of the game. And then I think he's getting gun shy in the pocket because of who's outside with him. And I don't think he trusts that they're going to get open. So he might look one time at one read and then he's, all right, now I'm taking off. So hopefully this break that he gets to get healthy will also time up with Terry and Debo and Noah coming back, and he'll have all his tools, and that he doesn't have to he can reprogram his mind that I got guys that get open, these plays are going to work. I can stay in the pocket a little longer, but currently that's not the case. And offensively for the run game, I don't know why they couldn't get it going either. I will say this, Sam Cosme is an upgrade from Wiley from this first game. He played pretty well, so that's encouraging moving forward. I think your line looks really good. Now, what are we? Week? I don't even know what week you're in the season here, but
yeah, entering week 8.
Yeah, you're entering week 8, and you finally got what looks like a fresh line. Now, I do want to ask you too, because I'm not paying attention like we talked about, but I did see Wiley come in the fourth quarter. I don't know if Cosme got hurt or they just knew the game was out of reach.
I think that's what it was. Yeah, there was no information on Cosme being hurt. None.
All right, good. All right, so that's good news. Then defensively, more of the same struggles. Can't cover in man coverage. These are two of the best receivers against man coverage in the game. So Lattimore is going to struggle for sure. Sandersfield is going to struggle for sure. They can't cover CeeDee Lamb and Pickens. They just can't do it. But there was a lot of man coverage that was called from Washington. They tried to run their inverted cover 2 one time, and that's the time Debo beat them deep, streaked right down the middle of the field.
CeeDee Lamb, yeah, exactly. That was inverted cover 2, right?
Yep, that was the inverted cover 2. So that's why Lattimore was all the way deep. He was the second safety in that inverted cover 2. But they've been putting this on tape, Washington has, all year. And I would go back and look at the plays, but the success rate for them running this inverted cover 2 is very low. Teams have been completing passes on it all year. And Cowboys had 5 weeks of film to see it. I don't know if that wasn't an ad-lib with CeeDee Lamb, because he sees Sandersfield bail right in front of him. He knows it's an inverted cover 2, and he might have just took off for that reason. They said, when we get this coverage, we're going deep right here. We're going to put these safeties in the bind, and it worked.
So
after that, they never ran it again.
I got to tell you this right now, because yesterday I said on the show, because I looked at that play over and over again, and I said, this is their inverted cover 2. And then, you see Wagner dropping into that, cover 2, hole area. First of all, it seemed to me like Savage was the one that was a little bit confused, but I'll come back to that in a moment. But I actually said, I don't know that CeeDee Lamb was even supposed to run that route. Somebody sent me a tweet of Brian Schottenheimer after the game, apparently told the Dallas media, yeah, that was not the play. CD improvised. So you nailed it.
See, I don't know any of that, but I could just see it on film that would be a clear example of why they would do that ad lib. If I saw this on tape, this would be something that Dak and I probably would have talked about too on film. Hey man, we get this invert cover 2 and it's the right formation, I'm gone because I'm beaten. So Savage isn't confused. I see what you're saying. I just pulled the play up. He's not responsible for the deep. It's cover 2. You're just going to have 2 safeties. So it's Lattimore and it's Quan Martin.
Okay.
They're the safeties.
Yep.
So it's inverted, but it's still just basic cover 2.
Right.
So Savage is coming down, working the hole. Wagner's getting a little deep, kind of like to Mike, or excuse me, the Tampa 2, but it's like it's an abbreviation of it. But 100%, when he throws his hands up here, I think he reads this 2 safety split. He knows I'm good. Like, I'm gone. Let's do this. Dak sees it, chucks it up, little underthrown ball, and then Lattimore's play on the ball is terrible.
He and Quan Martin did the thing they do every one of my callers called in and said they're 7 for 7 on colliding this year.
That's true.
It's amazing.
This is man coverage. They're not getting picked. This is a zone coverage.
Yeah.
They'll bump into each other. So
the other part of that too, right, is no pass rush.
Yeah. Well, you're not going to get it now, and you're not going to get it. So your best pass rusher now, to me, is Jacob Martin. Now that you're not going to have Armstrong, this game especially, he was a lot of effort from Martin. If I'm transitioning to that, he was really good for me on film, and it was mainly effort. And it was clear that he knew somebody needs to step up on the D-line. Armstrong's out now. We got injuries. Somebody's got to provide pass rush other than Armstrong. So shout out to Jacob Martin. I thought he played really well despite all the points getting put up on the board. But he was a standout for me on defense, more so than he had been in the other weeks. So good there. But to get back to it, so they stopped running this invert cover 2 after they got burnt here, and then it was basically man coverage the rest of the way. And they just don't have the guys that can hang with Dallas on the perimeter. And I think they're running man coverage just because they're trying to find a pass rush and they're going to bring extra guys. So even that was disappointing too. When they would bring pressure, so they would get single blocks, right? So you bring an extra guy, then you hope your Paynes and Kinlaws, don't get double teamed, and everybody's got a one-on-one matchup. Well, they weren't winning any of those one-on-one matchups for the most part. So bringing pressure didn't really increase the timing of Dak Prescott at all. So the guys get to still run their routes with their typical timing, and it's hard to cover these types of receivers for that long a duration. So kind of the perfect storm there. You just don't have the bodies on defense. And I know I'm a broken record here. If I get man coverage, I'm looking for Lattimore and Sandersville, and every team is doing it. Nobody, there's no reason not to. If they bring motion, if you're watching the game in the broadcast next week or the following week, just pay attention to motion from the offense standpoint, and if one of Washington's guys are following them, because if they are, then the QB knows it's man coverage, and then chances are that ball is going to Sandersville or Lattimore, and you'd be shocked at the percentage of that. I see it every time. Once I'm watching the All 2020 and I see a play go, and I see man coverage and I see the motion, I'm like, oh, they know it's man coverage. Here comes the ball, Lattimore. Here comes the ball, Sandersville. And they just can't step up to the challenge. Oof. So I don't see how you're going to fix it, honestly. Lattimore doesn't look like he has any type of burst or break towards the football. He's not confident. He's not even – if I was Lattimore at this point, I'd be gambling. I'd be jumping routes. I'd be trying to guess because my standard technique isn't working. I don't cover anybody. They're always open. So why not take a shot? I'm going to guess you're running it out here. I'm going to guess you're running a post here to try to help myself out because all I am is just getting picked on. And if I am in phase, my hands are just glued to the receiver. He can't keep his hands off anybody. So he's going to get called for PI even if he gets a chance to break up the pass. So you got problems in the secondary for sure. We've talked about it all year. It's not getting better. Maybe what was Will Harris's injury? Is he coming back?
No, he's done for the year.
He's done too, man. This is a season of injuries for Washington for sure, and I don't think he got the bodies to overcome it.
That was Steve Suter talking a lot about the defense. He talked a lot about Jaden's game, graded him, if you want to listen to that on my podcast. He also mentioned something. I gave Sandersville after the game. I said, at least he had a pass breakup in the game. If you recall, there was a play where Dak is kind of flush from the pocket, throws to CeeDee Lamb, and Sandersville gets a pass breakup and, raises his arms up in the air. Finally, I've got a pass breakup. And Steve said it made him laugh because he was beaten so badly off the line of scrimmage by Lamb, and Prescott, for some inexplicable reason, didn't look at him. It would have been a touchdown. It would have been a house call had he thrown it to him. There was so much separation with Lamb in motion and then lining up in the slot against Sandersville. But the play kept extending, and then Prescott ended up rolling out and throwing to Lamb late, and the ball got broken up. It's interesting when you do watch the all 22 from that perspective on a play in which I bet you he got graded highly by some of the advanced stat, groups. Suter's like, no, he got absolutely wasted at the line of scrimmage on CeeDee Lamb's inside move. Prescott on 3rd and 3 was looking elsewhere to try to get just a quick chain mover and instead missed what would have been an easy house call. Interesting stuff. He's been excellent in breaking down the film. All right, when we come back, you'll hear from Quinn. We're going to do a quick NFL power rankings, and I've got a stat on Washington's offense that I think we mentioned, but I wanted to emphasize when we return. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980, the team980.com. Don't forget, by the way, we are sponsored by IHOP, introducing the IHOP value menu, where all your breakfast faves are just $6 each every day. Where else can you get a big, filling, sit-down breakfast for only $6? Go to your Happy Plates with the $6 IHOP value menu, available every day at IHOP. $7 in some locations.
All right, happy Thursday, everybody. Here's what's happening. The big news of the morning. The FBI has announced a number of arrests that have been made in relation to illegal sports gambling and poker operations allegedly tied to the Italian mafia. Included among the 34 defendants arrested, Portland Trailblazers head coach Chauncey Billups and former Miami Heat guard Terry Rozier. The Wizards, they took on the Bucks last night in Chris Middleton's first game back in Milwaukee since being traded last season. The former Bucks forward led the Wizards in scoring with 23 points, 6 rebounds, and 3 assists, but the Wizards defense largely comes up short early with 72 points allowed in the first half. The Wizards fall 133-120. This update is sponsored by the Team 980 YouTube page. Just open the app, type in the Team 980, hit subscribe. Kevin Sheehan is live every day from 10 to 1. You can catch Den's office throughout all football season. Don't forget to hit the like button whenever you do decide to join us and turn on notifications to stay up to date on all things DC sports. And that is what's trending.
All right, we'll push off power rankings until tomorrow. But Quinn's coming up here in a minute. I did want to hit you with something. So I think most of you knew that coming into the game on Sunday, Washington's offense led the league in dropped passes. They also lead the league in dropped pass yardage as a percent of total yards. What does that mean? It means that where the drop passes are happening in terms of the part of the field and the yardage that would have been expected, Washington's losing the most yardage with their dropped passes of any team. Well, I shouldn't say of any team. Jaden Daniels leads the league in dropped pass yardage as a percent of their total offense. So right now, if you take away the drop passes, Washington would have a top 8 pass offense in the NFL. Without it right now, they're 26th as a pass offense. Of course, it matters who the receivers are, no doubt. And it matters, a lot of things matter right now. It is not the best spot to be in where we are now with the injuries, but more importantly now with an offense that no matter who's out there is going to have to match the other team possession for possession. That's going to have to happen. Monday night's a mismatch. Xavier Worthy, Rashee Rice against our defense. If they don't figure out a way to run the football and possess the football and keep Mahomes and that offense on the sideline, Monday night could get really ugly. There's always a way in the NFL, and the way Monday night is to run the football and possess the football and score when you have it, because I don't see much hope unless Mahomes just throws a couple of balls up for grabs, and somehow the defense catches them. Or Jawan Taylor has 6 false start penalties, which is always a possibility. But, man, their offense, which is humming right now against our defense, looks like one of the mismatches of the year. Do we have Quinn?
Oh, still waiting for the Commanders.
Okay,
YouTube
still waiting
page
for
to
the
go
coach.
live.
Okay, we'll get him started when he joins and starts to talk with the local beat. Obviously, we'll get a formal announcement, I am assuming, that Jaden is out rather than just the reporting and the sourced confirmations from a lot of people, including guys like Ben Standig and John and everybody. But maybe some more on the defense potentially from the coach. Remember, it was Monday. The coach said, yeah, we're not going to talk about the defensive things, when he said on Sunday after the game, everything's on the table. We're going to look into everything. But he said they hadn't started that process. He would have more on that on Thursday, meaning today. So maybe we'll get more on what he's thinking defensively to try to mix things up. There are not a lot of options here, and I've shared this with you guys before. It's not just one thing. And I think that's the problem, is it's not just coaching. It's not just personnel. It's not just execution. It's everything. I actually asked Suter that yesterday. He said earlier in the year with their coverage mix-ups, I would have told you coaching, but some of that's actually improved. Now it's personnel. They don't have anybody that can cover, and without Dorrance Armstrong, they're going to be hard-pressed to generate a pass rush. The good news is they can't stop the run either. So we have that. That is working. Man, it got bad quickly on defense, didn't it? It was really dicey, I thought, all along to hang your hat on the results against the Giants and the Raiders. That was really dangerous because the Giants were banged up. They were starting Russell Wilson. He looked inept that day. And then the Raiders are a mess, obviously, everywhere. And, I think a lot of people, including, listening to Witt and Quinton, occasionally refer to those games as games in which, look, we did it. We know we can do it. Yeah, but the opponents were not very good. And when you faced Green Bay, you couldn't get off the field. When you faced Atlanta, you couldn't get off the field. When you faced the Chargers with their horrendous offensive line, there was still too much easy pitch and catch at times in that game. And now you've got, no defensive ends. They did re-sign Jalen Holmes. That happened as we thought it would earlier in the week. And you've got Mahomes in Seattle and Detroit all on deck, with Detroit in the hole, Seahawks on deck, Chiefs up next. They're in the box, getting ready to have a fun offensive night at Arrowhead Monday night. You know what stinks is when the schedule came out, man, this looked like, wow, Mahomes, Jaden, Monday Night Football. That's a game for everybody, not just us. That's a game. 13-point underdogs. All right, Quinn apparently a little bit late getting started. So we'll leave that up to the next crew, Chris's crew, to give you what Dan Quinn says when he meets with the media. Thanks to our guests. We had a busy day. Charch and Denton was on with us for a while. JP Acosta from CBS Sports and Steve Suter. Back tomorrow with smell test picks, go around the NFL, and talk about tonight's Thursday night game. Chris Russell's up next.